I never had any intention of schooling. It was just like, that's interesting. I'm going to do it.
He is a Roman Empire expert and entrepreneur, Jeremy Ryan Slate.
Education is the key. When you know more, you make better decisions. I believe that America haven't been a functional republic in a very long time. Inflation gone wild. We have an immigration problem. We're in the 3rd century crisis.
The Roman Empire. What are we referring to here?
Rome has almost 1,000-year history, and it has different eras that existed. It's not just an empire. Empire is what happens later. The Praetorian Guard were the people responsible for protecting the emperor and oftentimes killing the emperor.
Do you think there's any chance they assassinate Trump?
When they can't cancel you, when they can't put you in jail, the next step is to assassinate you. So I guess they could.
Is Scientology a religion?
Scientology gives you a lot of tools to handle life.
Do you think free speech can be preserved indefinitely?
It's really difficult.
Well, welcome, dude, to the Golden Mic.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks for coming in for this. Jeremy Slate, right?
Yeah.
Jeremy Ryan Slate?
Yeah, my parents named me after a cowboy actor from the TV show Bonanza.
Oh,
so
okay.
I couldn't get found in Google for like ever. So if you look up Jeremy Slate, it's some like old guy with like a beard and shit. And
I mean, you got a mustache, so you're halfway there.
Yeah, it's funny because I've had this like whole Roman Empire kick going because that's what my master's degree's in.
Oh,
and
really?
the thing I was finding is, weird as this is, I look really young. Like I turned 37 last week, but like, So without a mustache, people treat you differently because you look like 25% younger. So like I'm doing like a lot of bigger shows and stuff, and it's like having the mustache, people have treated me differently.
Really?
It's been interesting.
That's fascinating. That's so crazy. Like, bro, I look like I'm 12.
It's like one of those weird like psychology things.
I have a baby face for sure, but I don't know. Okay, so like, give me your background on it, because we've been connected for a while now, right? On social media.
At least
right?
5 years.
Yeah. I mean, like just on Facebook's, kind of our main platform there, but like never met in person. But I know you do a bunch of stuff with the podcast world. I know you've got, your hand in a bunch of different things. So you've got a background in the Roman Empire, which we're going to talk about. It's funny. I told my personal trainer this morning, I was like, I'm interviewing this guy today and we're talking about the Roman Empire. And he goes, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Well, that's where it came. So that whole thing popped up on TikTok. Like, so I got my master's degree back in 2011, and nobody cared about what I went to school for. It's like you come out with a degree in that, and unless you have a PhD, like you don't do anything. Like that's the end of the road. And that whole how often do men think about the Roman Empire thing came out. My wife's like, I know you're not on TikTok. Well, I am, but I barely do anything on it because it's just too much social media. And she's like, you should start talking about this because like you have a degree in it. You're one of the few people that's like eloquent enough to talk about it and not be confusing.
Yeah.
And you're qualified to talk about it. So we had a lot of motion right off the bat. It's been pretty interesting.
Nice. Okay. So why did you get a degree in the Roman Empire? Because actually give us some background around. Like, give me the 60-second or 2-minute like synopsis of who you are for people that are like, what the frick? What are we talking about here? Right?
I'm a weird guy.
We like weird. That's good.
Before we got started here, I was telling you I was buying a lawnmower belt for my industrial lawnmower.
Yeah, that's true.
So my name's Jeremy Slate. I'm from New Jersey. I've lived there my entire life, but I live in like Northwest New Jersey, so I'm like right next to the Poconos. Okay. Live on 4 acres, 24 chickens. I got a pig. Whole bunch of grass and stuff like that. 2 kids. Been married since, like almost 10 years now. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
My 3rd-year wedding anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
2 days ago.
Oh, congrats.
3 years, bro. It's good. It's a good life.
Well, we're closing on 10. So we've been together for 15. I'm business partners with my wife, and I actually don't know how anyone would do it and not business partners with your wife. Because I get away with a lot of things that a lot of guys can't do because my wife's like, no, you need to go do that. Like there's a lot of opportunities she'll tell me I need to take because we're in business together, right? So we have that going. And then for me, I got my undergrad at Seton Hall in double major in Catholic theology and Torah. Funny enough, I never had any intention with my schooling. It was just kind of like, that's interesting. I'm going to do it. Like it was never, I got to my senior year and my advisor's like, like you're a couple classes short of a double major. I'm like, really? So I got the extra classes to get the double major in Judaism and Torah. I'm not Jewish. I just found it very interesting. And there's a few classes short of a triple major in history. I'm just like one of those people that like Seton Hall, they had this like sliding scale for credits. If you took 12 to 18 credits, it was the exact same price. So I just took 18 credits the whole way too, and I graduated like 160 credits or some weird amount. So I did that.
And then halfway through the first semester before I dropped out.
Okay. Well, my intention was to be an academic. Like I wanted to be a college professor. That's what I was going to do because I come from two parents that my dad didn't finish high school. My mom, her dad had a cancer her senior year of high school. So like she finished, but like didn't really go anywhere from there. So like college was always dinged in as really, really important to me. And now I don't think it's that important at all. Like, you know what I mean? I think most things in life you can do without a college degree unless you're operating on me or a law degree or something like that.
Which even law degree, dude, I'm like, ChatGPT for basic stuff.
Well, I have a buddy that he calls himself a common law lawyer. He's not a lawyer, but he's studied like Black's law and all these things. So he knows law better than most people. And he runs laps around a lot of lawyers. So I don't, maybe that's the thing where you don't need a degree. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, if it was a serious case, I'd want a good lawyer for sure. But my brother, before he passed away, I think it was his 16th birthday, he asked for a Black's Laws dictionary. And like, that was his thing.
So some kind of 16-year-old man.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, he was something, right? But he was big into that whole world of politics, law, the all that jazz. So that's how I kind of got into it. But
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my undergrad work. As I said, I'm like the world's biggest nerd, and I've been a competitive powerlifter all through my 20s. So I'd be like the guy, I was 40 pounds heavier than I am now. So I'd be the guy, now? I'm like 160. I was like 210, 215 at that point in time, like 8% body fat. So I'd be like the guy answering all the questions, sitting in the front of the class like this in like a bouncer t-shirt or something. It was very funny. So then I did a literature program at New College, Oxford, and studied like Catholic social literature, like Tolkien, Lewis, stuff like that. Came back and did my master's in the Roman Empire, literally because I had the coolest professor in undergrad that anyone could ever have. His name's Dr. Sean Lake, and he looks like Neil Patrick Harris, and he's funnier than Neil Patrick Harris. Wow. And that's how he taught your classes every day. It was the most engaging thing I ever experienced. And I got very interested in his Greek Civ classes. Specifically Alexander the Great. I became obsessed with Alexander the Great.
Interesting. So
then in grad school, I went in like as a classics major. Classics is, like Rome and Greece, and I took a whole bunch of Latin. I took 12 years of Latin. And I'm just a weird dude, man.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy.
But I read this really weird article in my first semester called Augustus at Actium. Actium is the last battle of the Roman Civil War, which ends in 31 BC. And he goes and prays before the body of Alexander the Great in this city called Actium. Alexander had been dead for 300 years, but he goes and prays before the sarcophagus. I'm like, that's really weird. Why is he doing that? And it made me research a lot of different stuff. And I actually looked at emperor worship cults and where they came from. And that's why I ended up majoring in the Roman Empire, because I read this one obscure article and I was so interested in it.
What are you religious now?
I'm a Scientologist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, we got so much to cover. This is gonna be so much fun. Okay.
I'm a practicing Catholic and a Scientologist. You can be both.
A practicing Catholic and a Scientologist. Apparently, you can be both, which is great. So much to talk about there. And now, what do you do? So that's kind of like your background in that.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur, though.
Yeah.
You run a company.
Yeah. So I got out, and I taught in a Catholic school because that's apparently what you do with a big degree that no one wants. And you make less than a Burger King drive-thru, so you make no money. And you work it's interesting because they have this guilt thing of like, oh, you got to work harder. So you work 100 hours a week, you make no money. And I was burnt out really fast. My mom ended up having a really bad stroke in 2012. And it made me look at a lot of what I was doing in my life. And no, you're fun. Made me look at a lot of what I was doing in my life. I'm like, do I want to do this? And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I tried life insurance sales. I was pretty good at that. I made a lot of money in life insurance, but I hated the conversations about, so you're going to die. You should buy this thing. You feel like a mobster. Yeah. You wouldn't want anything to happen to your family, would you? We all like them.
Right. Have you ever seen that episode of The Office when the life insurance or the insurance guy tries to sell insurance to Michael Scott?
No, I've seen every episode of The Office. How do I not remember this?
Yeah, when he was,
I remember the bacon episode where he cooks his foot.
Yeah. No, but literally, it's just an insurance guy trying to sell him, and Dwight and Andy convince Michael that this guy's in the mob, or in the mafia, and
oh my gosh,
he's trying to sell the thing. Oh yeah, that's exactly.
I don't know why I don't remember this, but that's crazy. How you feel selling life insurance. It's and I was good at it. I made a lot of money doing it, but I was in about 6 months. I'm like, I really don't want to do this, so I went into network marketing, which that's an interesting
entrepreneurship.
It's a gateway drug entrepreneurship, but you find all of your social conversations get a little bit weird because you're looking for every loophole and you're like, so I've got this thing. Do you want to know about my thing? And like, you kind of stop listening and you keep looking for like telling people about your thing. And it just, I don't know, like I did well with it, but like it really, to me, it changed how I engage with people, and I really didn't like it.
Yeah.
And
I think that's for a lot of MLMs though too. A lot of people in that space, I think, find that. And I think the people that really succeed either are just okay with everybody just knowing them to be about that thing, or they find an alternative.
Well, and it's not terrible either, because like I guess the thing is, like, you can help a lot of people. Like I've met a lot of people in network marketing, like that had no education background, had no like one of the most successful earners I've met, like grew up in a trailer, and what she's doing now, I'm like, that's incredible. So it's definitely an ability to lift yourself up, get a great education. Like it is, I had no business background. It's the best thing I ever did from that perspective. But for me, like I didn't like how it made me engage with people. It changed me, and I didn't like that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
So I did that, and then the last thing I did before I kind of like figured my life out was I was selling products on Amazon. I actually went to China, and we went towards some factories. I don't know if I'm allowed back there, by the way, with some of the comments I've made in the last couple of years, but I may be on a list somewhere.
You literally, when we were preparing for this episode, you sent me a link and you were like, bro, I just went on InfoWars. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, I have 2 episodes. I had Raheem Kassam on from Steve Bannon's War Room, and we did 2 episodes about like the threat of the Chinese Communist Party. So like, I don't think I'm allowed back there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I went there, we explored factories, and it was really cool because like, you know, they take you out for dinner, they wine and dine you to like get you to like buy their products. So we placed an order for a bunch of stuff. We were private labeling on Amazon. We got ready to launch our product. And there's this one little checkbox in your product listing that says, display my $1 promo code on my listing. Because when you get started, you want to get like your sales volume up so that Amazon ranks you better. I left that little checkbox checked. One person realized it, and the same person in Maryland bought me out of an entire stock of everything I'd purchased in about 10 minutes. It was over. So that was the end of my private labeling career.
Gosh, dude. That's so insane. Wait, so like, you basically gave a discount code and didn't put a limit on how much people could buy from it?
Didn't put a limit, but also like there was this checkbox where you could check it and actually display the promo code on the listing. So if somebody was smart enough to notice that and be like, look at this idiot, and then just buy me out. And that was the end of it.
That's crazy.
So it was like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units in like minutes. So that was the end of my Amazon career. I put my tail between my legs, and the great thing about all those things I had done is I learned a lot of stuff. I learned how to build websites, you know, HTML5, CSS, all that fun stuff. I had learned how to build funnel pages, landing pages, all sorts of things. So I ended up actually working at a friend's marketing firm. And that's just how I, you know, paid the bills and started podcasts as a hobby. This is back in 2014. We had 10,000 listens in our first month.
Wow.
With me being nobody, it's just that I was willing to reach out to more people and reach for higher guests. And that kind of set us off to where we are. So in 2016, I started Command Your Brand. Actually, it was originally called Get Featured Media. Had another business partner. Didn't really go so well. We made multiple 6 figures in the first 9 months, but then we hated each other. So that company, I kept all the employees, and that became Command Your Brand in 2017.
Okay. And
it's a long, strange trip.
That was 7 years ago now, because now it's 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So what does Command Your Brand do now? Because I know you're
it's evolved a lot.
Yeah, big network of podcast stuff and everything that you guys do.
It's evolved a lot. So like when we started, we were a podcast production agency.
Yeah.
And costs now versus costs then were dramatically different.
Yeah.
So like what we needed, like I needed to charge somebody like $20,000 a month to make a profit.
Wow.
So like it just wasn't something where people are willing to pay that, especially when you're brand new, right? Like you've got 2 podcasts under your belt. Somebody's not going to pay you the amount of money to make a profit.
Yeah.
So the thing that we ended up doing, and this is really interesting because my wife was always like, we're never going to work together. My wife has her degree in PR. So her degree ended up coming together with what I was doing. And what we ended up doing was putting clients on podcasts as like a promotional action when they launched a new show. We found for a lot of our clients, we were working with busy CEOs and founders. Like, it's great having a podcast, but like one of them especially, I remember the conversation, he's a doctor. He's like, I got patience, man.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't do all these interviews as a host. Like, they're great. I've enjoyed them. He did some cool interviews too. Like we hooked up with Andrew Wakefield, Dr. Hyman. Like it was some really great conversations, but he just wanted to go on shows. So because of that, we just focused on that 20% and dropped the 80%. And that was really the growth thing. It allowed us to focus on just how can we do a better job? And the thing we've continually focused on, how do we create the premier agency, right? Because a lot of people booking podcasts, but how do we do the best job at that? So we focused on, you know, higher leverage, higher traffic, better clientele. Like we're only working with people that have done, at least 7 figures. They have 15 to 20 employees, because it's a harder campaign, and it's also a different type of person, right? Because like you need, like, when you're under 7 figures and when you have no staff, you just need to market, man.
Yeah.
You just need to get out there and do as much as possible. Okay. No worries. You just need to get out there and market and do as much as possible. Like, sure, you need some PR, but how PR functions for somebody who's early seed and who's somebody's later on is very different. So we started focusing on that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously I have the Golden Mike brand, and we do coaching, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, so you coach podcasts? I was like, no, we're a sales coaching company.
Right.
We happen to use podcasts, right? And one of the things that I found is that the opportunity with podcasts, like there's actually very, very few people that are willing to, not only willing, but also have the capacity to build a good podcast, right?
Well, and understand how it should work.
Right. And so like for me, I'm like, when we looked at the market, like I'm a big, like Hormozi's $100 million offer book.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, it's funny. Have you read the $100 million offer book?
I read the audiobook. I haven't read his newest one yet.
Okay. Everybody.
I watched that stupid webinar.
Everybody.
I have not. I have not bought the book. I haven't read the book.
I got $100 million leads.
It's on my shelf.
Yeah, and I feel like that's everybody, right? I feel like his second book, it was like the hype was amazing. Like
I did the audiobook offers. It's great.
Right. So like I feel like he dropped the first book and it blew up, and then he like reversed it. We did this big thing, and then everybody showed up, and then nobody actually read the second book. But his first book was just fantastic, right? And when I looked at like the market and like the need and like things of that nature, right? It's like to charge. Like I love selling stuff for lots of money.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite things to do. Like,
well, it's a different caliber of customer you get too.
And it's just fun to like figure out how to, because to me, it's all like a game, right? It's just like figuring out people's mind and like all this stuff. But it's very difficult to sell something for $20,000 or $25,000 when you're like, the ROI is 3 years, maybe. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, so when we really shifted our focus to understand that we were a sales training company, when we reversed, or like when I looked at the opportunity for podcasts and stuff, I came to the same conclusion, which is most people that want the exposure of a podcast, it makes more sense to get them on other shows, like at a high thing, unless you're building your own.
Well,
brand.
To start there, we find that like a lot of people that want to start a podcast should probably go on them first and start a podcast later on.
Yep.
Because there's 2 reasons to that. Number 1, you get so much more comfortable with your message. Yep. But number 2, you understand the flow of it. When you don't understand what it's like to be a guest, for most people, you're a terrible host. Like I know, at least when I started, dude, it was like a jail cell interrogation. Like put the light over their head. When did you start your business?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like for most people, like you actually need that to be more comfortable with your message.
That's actually a good point too. Yeah, I was thinking about the other day. I think that particularly in the entrepreneurship online space, we use words too loosely, like the number one question I always get asked, or everybody always asks me, or the biggest shift. Like,
do you know Tyler Basu?
Oh yeah.
So he posted that on Facebook the other day. He goes, the thing where people say, I always get asked. He's like, no, nobody ever asks you that. Nobody ever asks you that.
Yeah.
You just want somebody to ask that. Yeah.
But I actually did think about, I was like, what's the number one question that I get asked? And like, because I've done probably close to a couple hundred interviews at this point, but well over 100 times. And I was thinking like, okay, do I get asked about this or whatever? But I was like, no, actually the number one question I get asked is, so give us a little bit about your background. Like that's like
every single person,
every freaking time. Yeah.
I've changed that a lot for myself too. Cause like now when I'm opening an interview, like I have a topic I want to talk about. So I'm typically just like, tell us who you are and what you do. Like I just make it like a quick thing. Cause I feel like a lot of people are like, and I was there too, man. So I can't knock it. Like, tell us your story.
Yeah.
And it becomes a 45-minute narrative and then you don't get into the interview.
That's exactly right. Right. So I think it is an important thing because I've been on a couple interviews where they'll go right into questions with not even allowing to provide any context. And it's like, okay, I need like 30 to 60 seconds to like set the frame for who I am.
Yeah.
Right. Because otherwise it just seems like why would you listen to this random kid that looks like he's 12 talk about how to sell stuff for, tons of money. Right. So I do think it's important, but yeah, that's super interesting. So like, how big's your company now? And like, give us, how big's your company as far as like employees or like who you work with, like the volume of clients? Cause I know you work with a high caliber.
So we've changed a lot. So we used to run anywhere from 60 to 80 clients at a time.
Wow.
And the thing we found is number 1, not everybody we were working with was qualified. We had this 6-month campaign and we used to say that the 6-month campaign was we'd guarantee somebody 12 shows and every single one of them would get around show 10, what we call 12 showitis, You're like, no, I'm not going on that one. I'm not going on that one. I'm not going on that one. I'm gonna make this take a year and a half. So we really took a look at like number one, like who we're working at. So we dropped our 6-month program and we changed our pricing dramatically because we really wanted to work with higher caliber people. So that was something we did about 2 years ago. And that's been a big difference. So now we're working with anywhere from 30 to 50 clients at a time. Okay. And we have 17 people on our team. Half of those are in the US, half of those are in the Philippines. And got some really, really great talented people that have been with us for a bunch of years.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's just helping a lot of cool people.
So what, you got this entrepreneur, or you got this company, you're in the podcast, and you run, I feel like you specifically kind of run, I don't know if behind the scenes is the right word, but you run in like the network, right? Like if someone were to like Google your name, you don't have 10 million followers and, you know, aren't the biggest thing, but like you're connected, right? And you know a lot of people through the PR stuff or whatever. You've taken a very strong approach with, you know, the being pro-America, which I'm a huge fan of.
I always have been. It's just that I got really upset a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, same, right? For sure. So I feel like there's you, the entrepreneur, there's you, the, you know, American lover, right? Which like is awesome. And then there's you, the smart guy with the Roman Empire type of thing, right? And then Scientology, Catholicism. Like how do all of these things kind of fit in? Because I want to talk about the Roman Empire. Actually, like you hear a lot of people about it, but I didn't know you actually had a degree in it, right?
Yeah.
And like I'm sure you studied it tremendously. So like, and I'm sure there's so many similarities.
Well, and I'm weird too, because like I've been to Rome so many times, and I walk around and I'm like reading inscriptions to my wife, and she's like, "This is great." Yeah. I'm like, Marcus Agrippa built this. She's like, "Oh, okay."
Okay, so I've been to Rome once.
Yeah,
I went to Italy. We got to see the Colosseum, which is cool. Which, by the way, I was really hoping that Elon and Zuckerberg were gonna fight.
There's no floor in the Colosseum, though.
I know there's not, but like, there's that one little section off to the side, right? I'm like, dude, I would have paid a lot of money.
Yeah, but like, I think there's one in France and there's one in Spain that are still like fully built. Let's take one of those, man.
Bro, come on, it's Rome, all right? Like the Colosseum of Rome, Mark Zuckerberg versus Elon. That would have been like worldwide culture forever. I mean, that would.
Who do you think wins that, by the way? Like, I think Zuck's a better fighter, but like Elon could kind of like sit on him or something.
Yeah, but like, so I'm not a fighter. I don't know, right?
I'm not a fighter either. I was a wrestler in school, but that's about it.
Okay, and so the thing that I've been told about, you know, jujitsu is that like if you know what you're doing, you can essentially use somebody's weight against them, right? And like, I love Elon. Like I am, dude. I wear a shirt with him smoking a joint on Joe Rogan's podcast.
It's actually behind you right now.
Like, I have a poster of it. I have a shirt of it. Like I am like Elon. I drive a Tesla. Like I'm Elon all the way, right? But I don't know if I actually had to put money on it, I think I'd bet on Zuckerberg.
Well, here's the thing I'll say. Like number one, I don't know jujitsu. But I did wrestle a lot. I wrestled all through grammar school, high school. I didn't wrestle in college, but we still used to like roll around and stuff in our early 20s. And one of my buddies disappeared for a little bit, came back 2 years later knowing a bunch of jujitsu. I was a better wrestler than him. He kicked my butt knowing all the jujitsu stuff.
That's what I'm saying. So
I think, and it was only 2 years and it was like crazy.
It's like cool all of a sudden, bro. Like I'm not Zuck's biggest fan, right? Like I think that I mean I've been banned on Facebook for saying the wrong things, and you know I've gotten my.
You got your ads account back though. I saw.
I did, yeah. That was some black magic wizardry right there. Some sketchy stuff. It was so funny, but anyway, we did. But like he's cool all of a sudden, and like he's not an idiot, right? Yeah. Like he's been training, and like the people that he trained with, you look up the type of people like who he's been training with. Like these are not like just your average instructors. Like these are like the best in the world type of deal, right? So Elon, I would say Elon, bro, like I love you to death. Like, but maybe stay out of fighting. But anyway, so like where do all these things fit into you? Why? Because I feel like
it was a struggle for a long time. Like that was the thing. It was because when we started the company, like I guess I started like overly political correct with it because I'm like, oh well, you can't offend anybody, you can't upset anybody, and I don't know, man. Like privately, I'm the most inappropriate person you've ever met in your entire life, and like you know what I mean. Like I am like you should like if you had met my father, like the jokes my father makes, my wife's like we'd have to make an explicit book of the jokes your father makes.
Really?
Like he has these jokes like, and he'll say them, and you're like, wait, what did he just say? Or like you'll be sitting at dinner, and he'll be like, you know, happiness is seeing your mother-in-law's face on a milk cart. And you're like, wait, what did he say? Like, he'll say things like this. So, like, I don't know. I feel like I've picked up, like, some of that, like jokeness. And also, like, I've always been a very political person. I guess I started out very libertarian. And as I got older, I got more, like, conservative libertarian? Because I guess if you get a family, you start looking at things a little bit differently.
Okay, so I want to actually set the tone on that because I think that's important. So I think one of the things that Ben Shapiro said very well one time was he goes, personally, I am conservative. Politically, I am libertarian. And I was like, that perfectly describes me in the sense of like, I am pretty darn libertarian. Like one of my favorite, the quotes that goes around, it's like, let the gays be gays, let them have their guns, let them smoke weed, and like, let them, and let, them
if they're not hurting me, I don't care.
Church, right. And so for me, I'm like, my personal religious beliefs, I do not think should be the thing that affect the laws. Like, I don't care if somebody's gay or not. I literally could care less from a political perspective. Right? I think that most things should be legal, including weed. And I mean, I think most drugs, period, should be legal with few exceptions.
Well, right? I think yes and no, right? Because I think there's two problems to that. Because this is where, okay, go ahead. Okay.
But like, my point is that like, from a political perspective, my stance is basically, if the government can be left out of it, leave them the F out. They
absolutely.
Absolutely horrible.
They ruin everything they get into.
Right. And I'm also like, I do agree with a lot of what liberals want to do, from like helping people and social programs and things like that. However, I'm like, I just think the government is the worst possible entity to run those things ever. Right. Personally, though, how I live my life and like how I conduct in my marriage and in my personal life and how we run things, very conservative, right? So where do you fall on that spectrum? Is there a difference between how you show up politically and how you are personally, or are those more the same?
So how I show up politically now is more 100% me, because I got more comfortable with like who I am and what I believe and my thoughts on things. And I think it's interesting because it's such a tough thing to approach, because there's some things that libertarians would say that I don't agree with, right? I want the government in my backyard, but like I care about certain cultural issues. Like some of the things happening in education right now scare the hell out of me. Well, a lot of libertarians would say hands off. And I'd be like, well, those things are going to cause like a cultural decay we got to handle, like a lot of the gender stuff we have happening and whatnot right now. So that's where like I'm very pro-life. Like there's a lot of these things that to me really matter, where I think libertarians would take a different viewpoint on it.
But like, wouldn't a libertarian, like with the education things?
Well, they'd want to privatize education.
But I am kind of for that.
No, I don't think that's a bad thing, because if you look at it, you got to look at where our education system came from. My kids are homeschooled, first of all.
Mine will be as well.
Okay, cool.
I was homeschooled too.
So like, I wasn't, but I kind of wish I was. It's funny because you look at it and you're like, oh, the homeschool kids are so weird. Now you're like, no, that's what you want. Yeah. That's what you want. You don't want them like the other ones. Yeah.
No, I grew up eight kids in my family. Okay. We were all homeschooled. Yeah.
So I guess that's not a bad thing. But because when you look at it, education, where it came from, do you have any idea of where education in the U.S. came from?
Like, as far as
turn
like
of the century, like, it's Industrial Revolution. It really comes from the it's a mix of the Industrial Revolution with what's called the Austro-Hungarian model, which is to make soldiers in Europe. So it's not to make people that can build a business, that can do these different things. So I don't have a problem with privatizing schools and education. I'm already doing it myself.
Yeah.
I guess the thing I have a major problem with, and this isn't all libertarians, is the stance on drugs we were talking about.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like, okay, so here's the thing, right? Like, there's some people, like, I knew this one guy, and he was a white guy, but he didn't really act white, and he called himself Loyalty, but he's a really nice guy. And he was in like northwest New Jersey too. So he's like, so don't even get me started.
Yeah.
But like, he was a really nice guy and he really wanted to help people, but he got hooked on heroin when he was like 14. Yeah. And the only thing he could do, because he'd been arrested multiple times, was get a job selling heroin. So the thing I think we need to do is, I don't think it's so much about criminalization and decriminalization. I think we need to find better ways to not put people in a box once they've done a crime like that.
Yeah.
Because that guy, he got out and he wanted to do the right thing. And he's like, I'm clean now. I don't want to do this anymore. And like, but the only thing he could do is sell drugs.
Yeah.
So I think we need some system changes, because once you like to say that you're screwed the rest of your life, that there's no redemption, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that's not a Christian value.
And I would also say that, like, I mean, I grew up in a fairly conservative home, and a lot of the people around us were way more conservative than we were, which is pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Right? But like, everything that you told people not to do, like, that was the thing they all wanted to go and do. Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Though?
No, that's how society is, though, right?
Exactly. And so, like, I mean, things like, I think, like, things like, you know, heroin, meth, you know, like that, and like very, very, like, insanely addicting, like drugs like that. Like, obviously, I do think that there needs to be some limitations on that. But like, I think that education around, like, dude, I grew up.
We need better education around it. I think that's the thing. Like, we had, and I don't know, like, once again, my only experience is Catholic school because I went to public school until I was like, I got kicked out of public school. I was like a really smart kid, so I'd finish all my work fast, and they're like, listen, so Ritalin or he's got to leave. So my parents were like, all right, he's leaving. And so my only real experience is like Catholic education and what that's like. So for that, it was a lot of like the drug education programs were really good. So for me, like
really?
when I experienced those things, like I was like, oh, well, I know what this can do to you. I know what the result of it is. I also know a lot of people, you know, I'm from a small town area. Like I know a lot of people that have died from stuff. So like I've experienced that where I'm like, I don't know if I want to, like I've never even smoked pot in my life. I've never done a drug.
Okay, but that's the thing. Like I grew up thinking that like smoking weed was the worst thing in the world, right? Like it was basically like if you smoked weed, you might as well done meth.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was the same thing basically. And I smoked some weed for the first time and I was like, why? What's the issue here? Right. And like all of a sudden because it wasn't this thing that was like, oh, you shouldn't do it or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
It was like normal. So I was like, oh, I could care.
Well, that's why I think DARE was
right?
stupid. Like just say no. It's like, but why? You know what I mean? Like, and I think, cause I do a lot with an organization called Foundation for a Drug-Free World. And we actually go into schools and we educate kids. And I think the just say no thing, which came out of the Reagan administration, by the way, is stupid because it creates that resistance you're talking about of like, but why should I say no? Yep. Like education, and this isn't anything, man. Education is the key. When you know more, you make better decisions.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And so perhaps that's a better way to state my stance, which is like I think you said it really well, which is if somebody makes a mistake, they do a crime, right? Like it should not be the end of their life, right?
Yeah.
Like, that shouldn't be the end of it.
We need to rehabilitate people, give them a way back in.
And like the prison system is so crazy in America, dude.
Well, the
like,
private prison systems don't even get. Do you know about the for-profit prison systems in this country? It's insane. If people don't know about that, they need to Google it. It is insane.
Like you can literally invest in prisons.
Yes,
and it's a great business model.
Yeah,
I'm not advocating
because they get
for that,
free or very cheap labor. Like if they pay these guys, they'll pay them like 10 cents a license plate, or they pay them nothing at all. It's like insane.
It's wild. And so I think that the only thing that was more shocking to me to learn than there was private prisons was that the Federal Reserve was a privately held institution.
Oh, that is. The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you have not read that book, man,
mind blowing, dude.
Like, see, but these are some of the things that make me more libertarian. Like I look at that and I'm like, oh hell no.
Yeah. Are you into Bitcoin at all?
I have very little Bitcoin. I have very little Bitcoin. I don't know. I feel like it's more like a techie thing. I don't know. I just haven't really gotten into it.
Revolt. I mean, it's not a revolt.
I have friends that are like very, very into it. I just kind of never really like. I have a lot of gold and silver. Like I have a lot of. I have boxes of gold.
Of that.
I think it's the Irish in me. I have boxes of gold, and they're at the end of a rainbow somewhere.
Okay, so Roman Empire, because like I feel like there's so many similarities, and like I don't know much about the Roman Empire.
Sure.
Comparatively, I'm sure to you, I feel like I know more than the average person, just because. I mean, I've said this many times. I'm like, I think the average person, at least in America, is an idiot, right? I mean, like we're pretty uneducated here, right?
Well, part of a classical education would have been Roman Greek culture. We don't get that anymore. We don't.
So, right there. So, like. When you say the Roman Empire, right? Like, what are we referring to here?
So first of all, I use that phrase because that's the phrase most people understand it by. Mm-hmm. But when you look at Rome, what's that sound? Oh,
it's not picked up on the mic.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So when you look at Rome, like I think people have this misunderstanding of like Roman Empire, right? Like when you look at it, Rome's traditionally 3 eras. It's founded in 753 BC, and I don't use that AD, BCE stuff. So AD, BC is what I'm going to be using.
Perfect.
753 BC.
Hold on. Sorry. Actually, I really side note question, and this will make sense.
It's woke history. That's why.
Okay.
So it's BCE because you can't say Christ. So it's before Common Era.
Okay. So
and then Common Era. And it's like you're still using Christ as the denotion, but you're not saying it.
Right. But like, so when it comes to like Christ, I know you said you're a practicing Catholic, Scientologist. Mm-hmm. Do you believe... Like, you believe Jesus, obviously Jesus was a person, right? Like, there's no question of that. Do you believe Jesus was the Son of God?
Yes.
Okay, so you believe he was literally God in flesh?
Yeah, my undergrad degree is in Catholic theology, man. Like, I am very doctrinally Catholic.
Okay.
I think people have a lot of, we can get into Roman Empire in a second, but people have a lot of misunderstandings about Scientology. I guess you could say it's very effective self-help. Because I think a lot of times, like, people talk about the lizard brain and like all these different things that you do that you don't like. In Scientology, we have something called auditing, which is very similar to like counseling, but it actually gets rid of those things you don't like. So a lot of the stupid things I used to do just because I did them, I don't do anymore. It doesn't make me Catholic or not Catholic. It just helps me handle, how I handle myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but wouldn't that just be called self-help? That's not really a religion, is it?
Well, it's a religion because of the way you approach it as a spiritual being, right? Like, like you as a spiritual being, like, are what you're actually trying to solve. I think a lot of times we're trying to solve things of like, the wallpaper on the walls and things like that, rather than like actually helping us. And when you actually look at yourself as a spiritual being and like, you are a spirit, you can actually change some things and fix some things.
Wasn't that in line with Christianity and even Catholicism?
Yeah, but like not everything we do is practical, right? Like some of the things we do, we've memorized and things like that. So we want to actually address you. And I think that's what's important.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So
it's a really long explanation.
We're gonna get into it. Okay. But like I want to go to the Roman Empire first, because I think it'll tie back into this.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So Roman Empire. So it's founded in 753 BC. It's a kingdom. Rome traditionally has 7 kings. The first of which is Romulus.
Wait, seven kings over the course of time, or 7 kings at once?
So 753 BC to 509. So over that time period.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you look at it, like these guys were really, really old or didn't exist. More likely didn't exist. So there's traditionally 7 of them. The last one is Tarquin the Proud, or Tarquin Superbus, and he's killed by a guy named Brutus in 509. Now Brutus is really important because if you remember the death of Caesar, Caesar is killed by a guy named Brutus. So that's why if you look at a lot of that history, it feels like it was actually constructed during the Republic, because the next phase, 509 BC to 31 BC, is the Roman Republic. And that's different than the Empire. The Empire is 31 to 476 in the West and 1453 AD in the East. So that's kind of your eras you're looking at in Rome.
So you have, what was the first one?
The kingdom is 753 BC to 509 BC. There's traditionally 7 kings.
750? 17?
753 BC to 509.
To 509. Okay.
BC.
That's the kingdom.
Then it's a republic in 509 to 31 BC.
Okay.
And then it becomes the empire in 31 BC until 476 AD.
Okay.
So I think that's a major confusion people have, is they don't realize like Rome has almost 1,000-year history, and it has all of these different eras that existed. It's not just an empire. Empire is what happens later.
Interesting.
So then with the comparison point I like to make is people, and I guess the reason I've started talking about this more recently is, number one, the whole, how often do men think about the Roman Empire? I think about it all the time. Yeah. I'm very interested, but I'm a very inquisitive person. Like I want to know, and I want to look at things, and I want to find out about things. I've read a stupid number of books just because I was interested in something.
Do you think that the Roman reign, empire, kingdom, but we'll say it was the empire. Do you think that was like the America is like the greatest superpower since then? Like, are they equivalent as to like how much influence they had over the world?
You could make a case for that, but I also don't like a lot of the military action we've taken. I think it hasn't been cool how we're trying to play the world police force.
No, I agree with that. I'm just saying, like, just like strictly from an influence perspective.
You could make that case, but then you could also make the same case for, like, the Holy Roman Empire.
Okay,
so under Charlemagne in 800, okay. and that's a whole nother can of worms, because that's 800. The year 800, Charlemagne is named Holy Roman Emperor, and that's the Pope basically asserting primacy over a ruler, and that because in the East the emperor still exists. There's so much to this to explain it all. Because in the East, there's still a Roman emperor, right? Because the East and West Empire was split in 284 AD between an East and a West emperor. And the East emperor still exists. And they name the Charlemagne Holy Roman Emperor. And they're like, I'm still the Roman emperor. Who's this guy? And so it would have been a major confusion of like, why is he doing this? So it's like kind of a reassertion of an old title. So I think you could make a really big case for the Holy Roman Emperor as being a very big empire, but it is something that travels around. Like it goes from the Franks to the Germans to the Belgians, and it's basically whoever the Pope names at that point in time. So it's more of like a papal empire, if that makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because in the middle, it's interesting because the papacy changes a lot from, it's this thing that's very, the emperors are controlling the papacy. And then when the empire falls, the papacy is basically controlling whoever becomes emperor at that point in time.
What's the papacy?
The Pope and the reign of the Pope. And then in kind of our modern era, like the Pope doesn't have political power like that anymore. And I think the thing that's interesting is and this comes more of a Roman viewpoint. There wasn't a separation between spiritual and temporal power. So temporal meaning power of this earth and spiritual power. So the Roman emperor was seen as kind of the person that was in charge of both. So that's why there's this transition between, how the Roman Empire looks at things and how the early Catholic Church looks at things. And thousands of years, we figure out doctrine, we figure out what we believe, and things change, right? And it becomes more of just a spiritual power. This is a whole can of worms, man.
So take us down the path of like the Roman Empire. I don't even know where to go. Right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it's such a broad subject.
Yeah.
So I think there's the one thing that I've been talking about more recently about this that upsets me is I'm a big Donald Trump fan. And people have been saying, Donald Trump is Julius Caesar. And I'm like, you're crazy. No, the Time Magazine wrote an article in March about this. And they had a PhD write it, which I guess means he's smarter than me, but whatever. The thing
I have very little respect for the hierarchy.
Yeah, as I said, looking back on it, I don't really now.
Yeah.
But the thing you have to understand is I believe that America, though we have a lot of the vestiges of a republic, we haven't been a functional republic in a very long time. I look at 1913 specifically as that date. Do you know any of what happened in 1913?
In regards to what?
So in 1913, with the 17th Amendment pass, the 17th Amendment basically took the ability of states to select senators and made it a direct election by the people. So now the Senate doesn't actually serve a purpose because the House of Representatives are what the people already voted for. So now states have no representation, and now the people are voting for both the Senate and the House. So it becomes more of a direct democracy thing. And people don't...
opposed to where it was, what was it before?
So like the state of New Jersey would be like, all right, these are our two senators, and they're going to serve, and they would basically represent that state's legislature.
But who would pick them?
The state legislature would vote on it. And here's why it's important.
Okay.
So in 2020, we had a little bit of a wild election, right?
No.
It was a little wild.
It was a little wild.
And if the 17th Amendment was still in place, what would have happened is all these state legislatures that were upset would have gotten the senators to basically send everything back to the states to take a look at it and see if we liked it and whatever it might be, or if it was by the books. But because the state legislature doesn't have that power anymore, it's basically whatever the mass decides, whatever the House decides. So the Senate was a really important thing to balance out the power of the people and the power of the states.
Okay, wait. So before 1913, what happened is that we, the people, voted for the House.
Correct.
But not the Senate.
But that was appointed by state legislatures.
And so basically we would...
And there was some problems with that too. Like you'd have corruption of them being like, well, if you give me money, I'll appoint this person. So that is a problem. And I do understand that they wanted to handle that, but it created a new problem.
Okay, so it was like basically the people appoint, or like this set of people, and then these set of people appoint senators.
Yeah. And the reason we do that, right, is because like different states have different population sizes. Yeah. So if each state had the ability to be represented as a state in the Senate, where they have two representatives, so that's how the state gets represented. Yep. But then the people also need the representation, and that's why we have the Congress, because then it's just based on population. Yep. So that's why both were very important. Now, states don't have representation, and that's why you've seen federal power get so strong.
States don't have representation.
Just the people.
People have representation.
Correct.
And how would you define the difference between the state versus the people? Because isn't the state just...
It's more of a federalist versus anti-federalist situation. So when you're looking at like when a state doesn't have any power, all the power gets pushed to the federal government then.
But define when you say state, because there's the people in the state,
right,
and then there's the state,
right.
So like, what's the difference between those two?
Well, because the thing you have to look at is like just populations of states are like here's an example. Like let's take Texas versus what's a small state? Delaware.
Islands, yeah.
Delaware.
Great.
So what the people of Texas want is going to be much easier to push over on the people of Delaware because there's less of them. Mm-hmm. What the Senate does is it allows that state to have a voice as a state. So that it's so basically that the mass of people can't bowl over the smaller mass of people. So that a state has a say because that state has a full buy-in to the republic.
But a state in relation to all of the other states.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So it's because
you would have
the people of that state are still from the state. But what you're saying is Congress, for lack of, is like just, hey, here is, because there's a lot more congressmen than there are senators.
Well, because you'd have like the state of California like ruling the country basically is what would happen.
From the okay. And then in 1913, that's basically what was allowed to happen now, because now no longer do the states have representation. Like you're saying.
And that's the first thing. The second thing, income tax. You don't keep a lot of your money.
Okay, I was gonna say, I know that
1913 is a really rough year, man. Crazy. So you know what happens over right before Christmas break in 1913, and it becomes law in 1914?
What?
The Federal Reserve System. So in
which allows for which that I'm very aware of, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy, because the Federal
we
Reserve
give up our sovereignty,
right? There was no such thing as income tax.
So 1913 is
like, we can create money now, so we got to be able to tax you for it.
Right.
Which is just
so 1913 is a pivotal year, because 1913 we no longer, like, states no longer have representation. You know, people do, which is fine, but that means we have changed from a republic to a direct democracy. That's a major change that happens. Okay. So, and we lose the sovereignty of our money, and we don't get to keep a lot of our money. People talk about, there was no income tax before 1900. There was some various taxes, but there wasn't one that lasted forever. There's one right after the Civil War.
It wasn't income tax.
Correct.
Right? Because, like, income tax, like, this is what people don't understand. And I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole because I still want to go down this. But, like, what people don't understand
But this is an important point.
Right. Like, what people don't understand is, like, when people are like, balance the budget, right? Like, we got to get out of debt. I'm like, you don't understand. That's not a thing. It is literally
not anymore.
Impossible, because, like, money is debt, and it's like there's more debt in existence than there is dollars.
Correct.
Right? And so, like, and the only reason that is allowed to happen is because we have income tax to pay it. Mm-hmm. And that's how, I mean, basically, this is modern day slavery.
Yeah.
Right, because of it. I mean, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are your three things that happened that year. So it's a very pivotal year.
Okay.
And the reason so when people say Trump is Caesar, I say they're full of crap. Your Caesar character is more somebody like Woodrow Wilson. Because if you look at Woodrow Wilson in the progressive era, man, it was rough for America. We get those three things. Like, I think women's suffrage was a good thing, right? I think that was a good thing. I think
Wait, women's suffrage?
It's when women got the right to vote.
Oh.
There's some people that are like, repeal the 19th. And I'm like, well, no, that's kind of crazy. I think everybody should have the right to vote. I don't think that's... Sure. But, so that's one of the things that happens under Wilson as well. But, like, there's a lot of things that it's called the progressive era, and it happens right after Teddy Roosevelt. It's the Woodrow Wilson presidency, which is like 1913 to, I think he dies in like 21 or something like that. The whole last year of his presidency, he actually had a stroke, and his wife's running the country. So that's kind of more of your Caesar character, like somebody that ends the previous thing, right? Ends the republic and starts this, like, you know, oligarchic democracy. And then if you want to look at your person that founds the new thing, that's more like FDR. Like, you have the New Deal, you create these new programs. America becomes more socialistic under FDR. So we really, if you want to say Trump is Caesar, you're crazy, because we haven't been a functional republic.
Like, what do the people mean by that? When Caesar just meaning ending something?
See, so, and it's interesting too, because even historically, the way people talk about it, it shows they don't understand the late Roman Empire or the late Roman Republic. Because in the late Republic, Caesar just kind of stepped into a power vacuum. Right before him, there's this guy named Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and the last. So 133 BC to 30, and if I'm getting too confusing on this stuff, please stop me. 133 to 31 BC, there's what's called the Roman Revolution. Okay. So it's really rough for a period of time. You have the first guy, which is Gaius Marius, and he's what's called a novus homo. He's a new man. Okay. So he wasn't born a patrician. He's somebody that basically, through his military service, gets a lot of wins. They make him a general. He becomes a consul, which is the guy that would run the military. One of the two guys that run the military.
Because, and just to make sure I'm understanding this, just following, because back then, it wasn't like you basically had to be you had to be in the family, basically, or you had to be one of the people.
But you could, so he's a novus homo or a new man. Like, you could actually, through your deeds, climb the ladder. Like, so you're not a patrician, but you could still do a lot of the things.
Patrician was by default, basically, you were in line for power unless someone like this came in.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Cool. Yep.
So Marius basically is one of the first guys to attack Rome, because what you're supposed to do is, the city of Rome has this area around it called the Pomerium, and it's like an area that just kind of borders the whole city where you're not supposed to bring troops under arms, because it was seen as a threat to the city. If you had troops and, like, let's say you were going to celebrate a triumph. The triumph is the parade that a general would do after he won a battle, and you would bring, like, your soldiers would come with you, and their weapons would come with you, and whoever you captured, the money and stuff. So if you're going to celebrate a triumph, you wouldn't disband your army. You'd wait outside the city, and they'd say, okay, it's time to do your triumph. You'd come in March, and then you'd leave. And they disband your troops. So Marius doesn't disband his troops. He comes in and tries to make himself in charge of Rome. Mm. And then the guy after this that tries to do this is actually one of his, like, he's called a praetor, but it's like one of his, like, lower generals, a guy named Sulla. Sulla does the same thing, but Sulla takes it even further. What Sulla does is there's blood in the streets. Like, it is, he creates this process called proscription. They would put these tablets in the middle of the Roman Forum. Every day, new names would show up on it. And if your name was on proscription list, people could kill you and not be guilty of murder. So the problem you would have would be like, that Josh Forti guy, he's got a lot of money. Let's put him on the list, kill him, and take his stuff. So you had this.
Just decided that just because like whoever they wanted to put on the list, they just
it started with whoever Sulla wanted on the list, right? But what would happen was if you had a private grudge, you would add somebody's name to the list. So it got it was wild because people didn't know when this process was going to end. There was just new names every day, and then one day Sulla just stops it. It just becomes this wild power vacuum. And then after that...
So why did he stop it?
He stopped it because he felt like he was restored the Republic, is what he was trying to say, because he declared himself dictator. The Roman office of dictator was somebody that basically take power for 6 months, and they would have ultimate power, because Romans had the idea that a group of people couldn't solve something, but one person could, because they can react quicker and think quicker. So
they put timelines on it.
They put timelines on it. So Sulla didn't, though. Sulla said, I'm indefinitely dictator. And I'm dictator to save the Republic. So then...
And this one I wish we had like VR, or like we could just strap on a headset and go back in time and like watch it all go down.
But you know what's wild? The thing people don't consider, it would have smelled terrible. Like the streets of Rome would have smelled terrible at all times. A lot of fun. So Sulla creates
this... That would have been great though, because I can sit here in the studio, I can strap on a headset, and I can have a nice aroma, I can see what's going down.
Yeah.
I love the future, dude.
So Sulla creates this power vacuum, right? Like, and everybody talks about Caesar, and what basically happens.
And Caesar comes after this guy.
Caesar comes after this guy. He's about. So Caesar's actually on the proscriptions list, and he doesn't get killed. He gets removed because he has enough like popular friends that help to get him removed. And he would have been like 18 or 19 years old at this point. He's not like a really old guy. And this is kind of this civil war that happens creates a lot of instability. And what you start to have happen is like kind of this, the people versus the government situation. It's like this oligarchy versus, the populace. And Caesar was more of what's known as a populare. So he would like, one of his first actions when he became consul in 59 BC was to actually give land to all the troops that had just gotten back from campaign. Because you would be consul.
Caesar did this?
Yeah. So you did that. You would be consul for a year, and then you weren't supposed to have. You were supposed to have 10 years in between. But under Marius, all this breaks down, and Marius had like 7 consulships. Wasn't supposed to happen. So this Republic revolutionary is very tumultuous. So Caesar comes in, and basically you have this competition then between. Well, let me back it up. So so what happens?
So fascinated right now.
It's the problem is like I need like 27 hours to explain all this, and somebody out there listening is to be like, you missed blah blah blah, and I'll be like, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
But
he's talking to an idiot. All right. So he's gonna dumb it down.
Okay. So every year there's different political figures in Rome, but every year there's 2 guys that are basically the major figures, and they're called consuls.
Okay.
Every year there would be 2 of them. In 59 BC, Caesar is one. The other one is this guy named Marcus Biblius. Okay. Biblius kind of has no power, but he's really the voice of the Senate. The Senate were really these more like all the rich guys. You had to have a lot of money to actually be able to be in the Senate.
Yeah.
Caesar had borrowed a lot of money to be in the Senate. So he was a broke guy that actually had all these loans, and everything he's done is motivated by, well, I can't lose this next step because then I'm broke. So so in 59, he's consul. The first thing he does is he grants land to all the veterans, and there's this thing that develops called the triumvirate. The triumvirate meaning like basically the 3 guys that are in charge. It's not an official thing, but it's a thing that happened privately. So you have Pompey the Great, that is like Rome's most successful general. You have Rome's richest guy, which is Marcus Crassus, and the 2 consuls were supposed to be the ones doing everything. But it was called the Romans referred to it as the consul. You would call the consulship. It would be like the consulship of Caesar and Biblius, right? But the Romans were referring to it as the consulship of Caesar and Julius, because basically it was just everything was being run through Caesar at that point in time. So the triumvirate, these 3 guys, Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey, are actually the ones making all the decisions.
So there's 3 of them here.
Correct, but it's a private agreement. It's not a publicly given office. So Caesar's the face guy, but all 3 of these guys together were ruling. Eventually, there starts to be
definitely not happening right now.
Right. So
definitely not.
So then, Caesar at the end of his consulship for 9 years then goes and campaigns in Gaul, because anybody wanted to get they were called proconsuls, basically. When you're outside of Rome and you're leading the military, you were not a consul, but a proconsul. You're outside the city. So the goal was to get a lot of money. Because as I said, like his whole career, the guy's borrowing money.
1 second. So a consul, compared to nowadays,
it's kind of like having two presidents.
Okay, so like it's like that's what I'm getting at. Like being a consul is like being a president. Like, it's like a position,
but not as much power as a president would have, right? Because it's like the system is different in a lot of ways. There's your two consuls, and there's this other system. I'm not going to get every position to it, but it's called the Cursus Honorum, or the Way of Honor. And these were basically like the political jobs you would go through before you could be consul.
Okay, and
so you couldn't be consul till you're almost 40.
And then once his consul was over, then he went outside the city,
and then he's a proconsul,
which is like basically that, but outside the city.
Yeah, because he's leading legions to go conquer new territory, and that was something everybody wanted to get, because when you could conquer new territory, well, you could take a lot of the money for yourself. And remember, Caesar's broke his entire career; like he doesn't have any money; he keeps borrowing money, and then every political move is made by well, I can't lose this one because once I go broke, it's over. So he campaigns in Gaul for 9 years, and during that time period, he gets a lot of money. They conquer a lot of territory. He wants to come back to Rome, but they had this issue in the last kind of, as I mentioned, 133 to 31. Everything's a little tumultuous. The laws that should have been the laws weren't the laws anymore. They kind of were there, but they didn't follow them. What they had started doing is after somebody's consulship was over, they would start prosecuting them for all the things they did during their consulship. So you have this. Caesar doesn't want to come back to Rome, because if he comes back to Rome, well, I want to be guaranteed they're not going to prosecute me. So he's like, I don't want to drop my army. So then the Senate under Pompey the Great raises an army and goes after Caesar. And they're kind of chasing Caesar all around Europe at that point in time.
There's some scary parallels.
So yes and no, because like this stuff, like revolutions are this way.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into something later on that you're going to be like, whoa, that's right now.
Okay.
But so this is really how the Republic breaks down. Caesar just walks into a power vacuum, and he's a guy that's always backed into a corner. And if a guy's backed in a corner, well, he's going to take some risks. And he basically defeats Pompey, and by doing that, he declares himself dictator for life. And that's kind of where your republic starts to end. Caesar's assassinated. He's assassinated in, I think, is it 44 or 43 BC, somewhere around there. And then he's not...
Caesar?
Yeah, he's not the first emperor. The first emperor is his adopted son, Gaius Octavius, who becomes Gaius Octavius Julius Caesar Augustus. So that's the first emperor, Augustus. And it's very interesting.
And the difference between a dictator and an emperor?
So they wouldn't have called themselves emperors. And Augustus is very careful about this, because as we mentioned, Rome traditionally has 7 kings, and they didn't like kings. That's why I think the story of Brutus killing the last king is made up, because the main assassin of Caesar is Brutus. So you'd want to say, oh, we killed our wannabe king, Caesar, just like we killed our previous king, right? Like they connect that family to it. So that's why I think it's made up that the last king was killed by a guy named Brutus. So in that, when he dies in his will, when Julius Caesar dies in his will, he names Augustus his heir.
Okay.
Because what you could do is you could take a adult and give them all of your titles, your name, and everything. So now he's no longer Gaius Octavius. He's Julius Caesar, not Augustus yet. He will become Augustus later on.
So basically, Julius Caesar, would you say, and like I'm way out of my league, out of bounds here.
And so once again, like I apologize. I apologize to people watching that this could take like 8 hours to explain everything.
This is so good, so good, so good. I'm trying to get all the questions here. So up until this point, was Julius Caesar the probably like the greatest, most influential, like most powerful leader of Rome, incapacitated to this point, or no? Up
to probably, once again, we don't know if he existed. Romulus, yes, you could say that at this point in time.
What do you mean we don't know he existed in 30 seconds?
Because it's, once again, they Romans, when they didn't have an answer to something, they made it up. So like a lot of the 7 kings of Rome, they're like, why do we have a Senate? Oh, because, this king decided we have a Senate. Like they used the 7 kings to define a lot of things. They didn't know where they came from. So it's like, so they would, if they couldn't explain something, they culturally did, because Rome didn't have a written constitution.
Okay. So Julius Caesar basically goes and to summarize everything that we've said so far, just make sure I'm on track. The guy right before him that did the stones with the tablets with the name of the street. What was his name again?
Sulla.
Sulla. Okay. So Sulla basically, Julius Caesar gets on this guy's thing, but he uses his power to get off the list.
Yeah.
Right.
He knows some of the right people.
And then long story short, he does a bunch of cool stuff. Right. And he becomes.
But he's a popularis, which means a lot of what he did is because people liked him. So the Senate didn't like that. So the Senate basically plots against him and they murder him.
Okay. But he basically goes and gets off this list, and over the course of time becomes a very, very powerful person.
Correct.
Right. He becomes the leader of Rome, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Like this. Then he leaves, because his time is up. He leaves, goes outside the city, comes back in, defeats the people again, and then he declares himself basically, I'm the dictator.
Yeah.
And then the Senate gets mad, and then they kill him.
Yeah.
But when they kill him, he basically took all of his titles and all of his power and transfers it to this other dude, and now this other dude is...
Hold on. So then that other dude, Augustus, has to basically fight Mark Antony and all the other people that were because Mark Antony was... Marcus Antonius was Caesar's main man. He was like his kind of first in charge. So he thought when Caesar died, he was going to be the guy in charge. Everybody was surprised when the will gets read and they're like, Octavius? I didn't even know they were friends. I didn't even know they were friends type of thing. And then
now he's got to fight this number one guy.
So the two of them get together to then go kill the assassins of Caesar. Then after the assassins of Caesar are dead, they fight each other. And that's the last battle, which is Actium in 31. And then Augustus basically is you have to understand people are really beat up at this time period. Romans have been in revolution for 100 years. They just want stuff to stop. And Augustus had basically brought them peace. And he says, okay, I'm going to lay it and I have to think this was some crazy psychology trick this guy was thinking.
Sure.
I'm going to lay down my power. I don't want my power. I don't want this power. No. Stay here. You know what? We've got a new title for you. It's called First Citizen. So they create this new title, Princeps, which we get the word prince from, First Citizen. So everything of the empires or the republic is still there. You still have a Senate, you still have the political offices, but now there's this guy called the First Citizen in front of it. It's not an emperor, it's not an imperator, it's a first citizen. So he's very smart with the terminology there because Rome didn't like kings.
So now this guy, he basically is the heir to Julius Caesar's, but he doesn't get it right away because there's this other guy who wanted it.
Yeah.
But those two guys team up and they kill the guys that killed Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
And then they get mad at each other and then they battle.
Yeah.
And then he kills that guy, but then he goes, hey, because he's just, really good at psychology. Is actually, we want peace. I'm going to give up everything. But then they're like, no. And he's like, okay, I'll come back and I'll be your leader, but I'm not going to call it that.
Yeah.
Yo. Okay. All right. We're caught up.
Okay. So now the reason I say that some of that stuff sounds similar, but I think revolutions are often similar in a lot of ways.
Sure, yeah.
I think we're more in a late empire stage. And the reason I say that is if you look at what I had said about 1913, I think a lot of the functions of a republic have ceased in America. Sure, we have a lot of the vestiges, but just like Rome still had the Senate, still had all the offices, but now they had a first citizen.
Well, we're a democracy.
We aren't constitutionally, but the way we function is. And democracies have a tendency to become, not so good, right? Because it can be a large number of people basically deciding what's going to happen. And democracies are also easy to sway. A republic is a much safer and much, firmer form of government, but we've gotten away from that. So if you look at that, where I put us is more in what's called the crisis of the third century.
Okay.
So in the crisis of the third century, so it's around, there's a bunch of things that cause it. And once again, I don't have 27 hours to explain it all, but I'll do my best. So we got
some time though.
Marcus Aurelius gets way too much credit historically. Sure, he wrote a lot of stuff and he sounded smart.
What are you talking about, bro? He looks cool in a movie. Right?
Okay, so he wrote a lot of stuff and he sounds really smart, but he didn't actually apply in life the things he wrote about. So there's what's called the 5 good emperors, and they actually change the process of how people are named emperor. Because as we mentioned, Augustus gets the job the first time because he was, basically given that title by adoption. So the 5 good emperors starts with Nerva, and I believe it's 96 or 98. It's somewhere around there. And so we're talking 80 now. So we're on the other side of the timeline. We've moved over. And
during this time, Jesus comes to Earth, and they've persecuted him.
He's been and gone at this point in time.
Interesting.
So we're
underneath the second Julius Caesar.
No, it would have been under Emperor Tiberius, who's Augustus's not son, but the son of his wife Livia, who he married after she already had a son, and that's where Tiberius comes from.
Okay.
So that would have been under Emperor Tiberius.
But then there was a Caesar, though.
They're all Caesars.
Okay, that's
Caesar goes from being somebody's name to a title.
Got it. Okay.
So you're gonna hear every emperor is gonna take the name Caesar because it goes from being a name to becoming a title. You look at your German word Kaiser, meaning king, Caesar. You look at the Russian word Tsar, king, Caesar.
Got it.
That's where a lot of these words come from. Caesar. Caesar goes from being a name to being a title.
Got it. Okay.
So that's an important distinction.
Okay. So now we're 80 BC or 80.
We're 96 or 98. We're somewhere around there. So we have, because I always mess it up in my head. I know there's way too many dates. So if I make any dates wrong, I'm doing my best here. It's 1,000 years of history. So Nerva is what's called the first of the 5 good emperors, and
Nerva. Okay.
So and they reign for an average of 20 years. This is where you have Nerva, you have Hadrian, you have some really good emperors in here. I don't remember them all in exact order.
And the when you say there's 5 good emperors, these are 5 in a row?
5 in a row. Okay. They change the process. So what they do, and it actually starts in the way, not because they had a good idea, but because a lot of them didn't have sons. And what they would do is they went back to what Julius Caesar had done, and they adopt the most qualified person around them to be the next emperor, rather than naming somebody's son or a general or something. So you get really good rule during this period of time. And that's why this period of Rome from, Augustus to the end of, what's actually in 284 to the reign of Diocletian is called the Principate. It's where Rome is kind of better rule. After Diocletian, it becomes called the Dominate, because you have somebody that's ruling more as a dominus or as a lord. But these 5 good emperors, they reign for an average of 20 years. There's Nerva, Trajan, Antoninus Pius. Once again, these aren't in the right order, so I apologize if they're not. Yep. Hadrian, but there's these very well-known emperors that bring peace. There's a Pax Romana during this period of time.
And what are they called?
The 5 good emperors. 5 good emperors. So I think the actual order is Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius.
Of Rome? It was of Rome, right? Mm-hmm. Good emperors of Rome in order.
Yeah, I think the first one's Nerva, then I think it's Trajan, then I think it's Hadrian, Antoninus Pius.
So Nerva ruled from AD 96 to AD 98.
Okay, there we go.
2 years. And then
so he reigns Trajan, then you have Hadrian.
Trajan reigned from 98 to 117, so that was about 19 years. Then Hadrian, he reigned
Antoninus Pius should be after that,
138, so that was 21 years that guy reigned. And then, Pius.
So Antoninus Pius is he's Marcus Aurelius' father.
Yeah, because then it's Marcus Aurelius.
Right. So then you have two emperors after that point in time. They're both Antoninus Pius' sons, Aurelius, and then his brother. I can't remember his brother's name.
Well, so in the movie Gladiator, which I'm sure is not historically.
Oh, it's not historically correct at all. It's a cool movie though.
It's a great movie, dude.
There's a second one. There's a second one coming out, by the way.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Russell Crowe killed it. So Marcus Aurelius, he had a son,
Commodus.
Yeah, and that son basically.
So that son's really important.
So he is historically accurate, though. There is a son.
There is a son, and some of it's historically accurate, some of it isn't.
Not in the movie how he the role, but he does.
Commodus is a real person.
Okay.
And Commodus is a real person, and he's actually historically very important.
Okay.
For a lot of the reasons you see in the movie, actually. But so you have these 5 good emperors, and they start this process. It's funny that Nerva is the shortest to reign because the average reign of all of them is actually about 20 years.
Yes. Yeah.
So you have a very steady empire in this point in time, and you have very good rule. Like, people would have been happy with living during this time period. They would have seen it as the height of Rome. 117 is actually the furthest extent of the empire. It never gets any bigger after that point. It actually, if anything, it gets smaller after that
at
point.
117. So that was when Hadrian started.
Right. It's right after Trajan. Yeah. Right when. So Hadrian's the one that builds the wall in England to actually keep the Picts out, and that's the end of expansion.
Okay, so I'm just going to read these descriptions here just really quick for each one of them. So Nerva.
Yep.
That's pronounced? Okay. Mm-hmm. Nerva was chosen by the Senate as emperor following the assassination of Domitian. Okay. His reign was notable for its restoration of many freedoms that had been suppressed under previous emperors and for starting the tradition of adopting a successor, like you talked about, right?
Yeah,
so
and because the first emperors are what's known as the Julio-Claudians. Nerva is like the first of those not to be a Julio-Claudian.
Got it.
Just comes from the two families that married. The Julian clan would have been the clan that Augustus claims, and his wife, Livia, was from the Claudian clan. So that's why it's the Julio-Claudian clan.
Okay. So then Trajan?
Yep.
Trajan is remembered as a successful soldier or emperor who presided over the greatest military expansion in Roman history, leading the empire to attain its maximum territorial extent by the time of his death.
117,
exactly 117. Then Hadrian comes in, known for his consolidation of the empire's borders rather than seeking expansion. He is perhaps best known for building Hadrian's Wall, which marked the northern limit of Britannia.
Britannia.
Okay, Britannia.
And he also would have gotten a lot of credit as well as bringing a lot of Greek culture into Rome.
Okay.
It's what's called the Hellenization of the Romans. The Greeks wouldn't have called themselves Greeks; they would have called themselves Hellenes. So it's the Hellenization of Rome at that point in time. Okay. They become very Greek in their culture.
Interesting. This is so fascinating. This is like, I'm like, okay, now I understand why you like. I don't know, okay. So then, Antoninus Pius, yeah. Antoninus Pius. His reign is marked by internal stability and prosperity throughout the empire. He is known for his peaceful methods and for not leaving Italy once during his reign. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
A lot of later emperors would have actually probably never even been to Italy. Wow. Which is really interesting.
Wow.
Like Diocletian that becomes emperor.
Like that, like that's Rome.
Right, but it changes so much. Like Diocletian, who's emperor in 284, had never been to Rome until he becomes emperor. Wow. And then he doesn't even rule from Rome.
Kind of like Trump, never been to, never been a politician. I guess he went to DC. But anyway, Marcus Aurelius then, the last one here, is often known for his philosophical interests. Marcus Aurelius is remembered as the last of the 5 good emperors.
And he's a co-emperor with his brother. I think it was Lucius Vernus or something. I can't remember what his brother's name is.
His reign was troubled by military conflict, but he is especially noted for his adherence to the philosophy of Stoicism and his writings, which are compiled in the Meditations. Where does Marcus Aurelius' brother fit into this?
He's like a co-emperor for a period of time.
Okay.
I can't remember his brother's name because he doesn't get as much credit.
Lucius
Vernus? Okay, there we go.
Yep, his adoptive brother.
There you go.
Co-ruled with him from AD 161, which is when he started, until his death in
180?
AD 69.
Okay.
So about 8 years.
180 is when Aurelius dies.
Okay. So they were both adopted by their predecessor, Pius, as part of the Hadrian succession plan that was designed to ensure a smooth transition with stable governance. While Marcus Aurelius is considered one of the 5 good empires and is famous for philosophical writings and stoic demeanor, Verus is often less emphasized in historical accounts. His reign alongside Marcus Aurelius is notable because it was one of the few instances of joint rule in Roman history where both empires had equal status. Interesting.
So now, the reason I think Aurelius gets way too much credit is because he's the one that changes that whole, I'm going to adopt the next closest qualified person. This is where Commodus comes in. He names Commodus emperor at it's either 13 or 16. So he names a spoiled kid emperor.
Oh, that's different than the movie.
Right. And so he names him emperor at it's either 13 or 16. He's very young. And Commodus wanted to be a gladiator. So he would often call himself Commodus Hercules, and he would fight in the gladiatorial games. But he was kind of a wimp about it, because especially when he was going to fight animals in the gladiatorial games, they'd bring out a little platform, they'd put Commodus on top of the platform, and then they bring in the animals. So he's like kind of picking them off, and they can't really do anything to him. So and he ruled in such a way that he was very oppressive as a ruler. He was very oppressive as a ruler, to the point that the Praetorian Guard and the Romans want him dead. There's actually chanting in the street that they want the men dead. So there's attempts to kill him. The first attempt, they try to poison his wine, but they get him so drunk that he throws up the poison and he doesn't die. So then his wife pays off a wrestler. This is how much they hate him. His wife pays off a wrestler, and then the wrestler strangles him to death. Now,
wild.
This creates a huge upheaval, which will then last. This is in 192 that he dies. It's called the Year of the 5 Emperors, because then there's these short successive reigns of what are called the barrack emperors. Barrack coming from the word military barracks, meaning that generals would basically raise an army, say, I'm in charge, and then they would be the emperor of Rome, whoever had the biggest army. So this starts a process which leads to what's called the crisis of the 3rd century. You have the last successful emperor, you could say, is not long after this. His name's Septimius Severus. He has a son called Caracalla, which in 212 gives citizenship to everybody in Rome. He just gives it away. He's like, so I want to be able to tax you all, so you're all citizens now. 30 million people overnight get citizenship. So you have the idea of
No one's ever very nice. They're like, we're going to give you citizenship so we can take all your money.
So citizenship becomes watered down, and they have barbarians, kind of on the fringes of things. So now you have this massive immigration problem because people want to come in and get their citizenship and they want to fight for Rome. Now you have these military leaders that want to be emperor. Well, how do you become emperor? Well, the best paid army is what makes you emperor. So what do? Start clipping coins, adding other metals to coins. Inflation by 284 is about 15,000%.
Which I think is actually very fascinating because I don't think a lot of people realize that, right? Inflation, people think inflation, oh, we printed money. I'm like, no, they were doing all the way back at this time, right? Which was that they would literally clip down the edges of the coins, which is crazy.
So we have an immigration problem, which has gone wild. You have a central power problem now because there's 47 different people in less than 100 years that claim to be emperor. And you have this inflation problem. Those are very similar problems that we have now because you even have, the federal government trying to take over the rest of the states and things like that. So it's, to me, like I could see people make a case for the Republic falling, but I think the Republic fell a long time ago and we're more in a third century crisis where
I don't think most people would say we are a republic.
No, that's why I'm saying, if you look at it, I think we have inflation gone wild. We have an immigration problem. We're in the third century crisis.
Got it. And the difference,
because history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes in a lot of ways.
Right. But the difference is we don't have 47 different rulers.
Correct.
Right? We have up until 2020. I think most people would have generally accepted the fact that who was president was
right, and that's why not everything is an exact. Just like in the fall of the Republic, not everything's exact.
And then 2020, and 2020 is where you start to have the biggest contradict where people are like, wait, we don't accept this, basically. Right? Led by Trump, and then Biden comes in, and so now we're here. And now we have these two guys going back at it again.
Yes.
Fascinating. So what I think is interesting, and I'm curious if there's any play to this back to Rome.
You see how much backstory there is to understand all this stuff?
So much.
Because it doesn't make sense. That's why I'm like, how much time you got?
Yeah. Well, no, this is really good. We got plenty so far right now. So, okay. So right now, obviously the border is a huge issue for many, many reasons. But before we get to that, I want to focus on the money issue because that's
money is the number one issue.
And it always is, right? Because you pick your topic, right? It could be a social topic, it could be a foreign topic, it could be an interim. It all comes back to whoever controls the money.
Correct.
Right? And because not only do we control the money of America, we have this money printer, but we control the money of the world because we have this money printer, right?
Correct.
And so this is the reserve currency. So now we're running into this issue where at some point we're going to enter this stage where we're going to have to print money to pay interest, right? I actually think people are like, oh, this bubble's going to pop. I actually think we have a long way to go before the bubble pops.
I agree.
I think we can get to, people are like, oh, 30 trillion. I'm like, I think we can go to 100 trillion, no problem, right? Because
it's not good, but sure, we can get there.
Right, because
as I mentioned in 284, it was 15,000% inflation in Rome, and that didn't crush the empire. It still existed.
Crazy, right? Yeah. So because we're not to the point yet where we're having to print money to pay interest. Right.
Yeah.
So to me, the clock hasn't even started yet. Right. That's when the clock I think actually does start.
Correct.
Right. So, but we are to the point now where we're going to print money forever. Right. Until it collapses. There's no such thing as balancing the budget. There's no such thing as politicians being responsible here.
Yeah.
Right. So back in Rome versus now we're printing money not to. I mean, I guess in a way it is to maintain the military power with it. They printed money. Essentially, because the more money they needed, money to fund the military, because whoever had the most powerful military was in power.
Correct.
Okay, and that's exactly what we're doing now because the military backs the dollar.
Correct. That's why I'm saying there's definitely parallels in a lot of historical events, but this one makes the most sense to me because you're looking at a strong, powerful military taking all the money.
So, could one make the argument where there's differences is where Trump is not. I mean, Trump's trying to get back into power, right? Right. You got Biden in power, or whoever's behind Biden, right?
Yeah.
In power. You've got Trump who's trying to get power back, but Trump's not raising a military.
Correct.
Right? So Trump is not trying to overtake this by military. He's trying to come back by. This is why I think when people are like, I don't get why people have such a problem with what Trump did. Take his stance on what happened in 2020, the election. It was a big steal or whatever. Take that out of it for a second. What he actually did, I feel like he governed. He conservatively.
Well, and he did a lot of what he said he was going to do. And I think that's the thing. If you look at it, we're dependent on foreign oil again. Inflation under Trump versus under Biden is nuts. If you looked at grocery store prices, if you look at gas prices,
right?
So it's a lot of the things that are good for people were in the right place.
But why?
But I will tell you the thing I don't like is you could say this about every president since George W. Bush is there's too much ruling from executive order.
And I agree with
that's a huge problem.
And I agree with that. Although I think that he did far less of that pre-COVID.
Yeah.
He still did it, obviously.
Well, and he let BlackRock rule our money, which wasn't great either.
Yeah, that's true.
That was one of the things that happened during the pandemic that people forget about is, he's like, all right, well, to help handle the situation, I'm going to let BlackRock help manage the treasury. And it's like, whoa, wait, what?
So
and I love Trump. Don't get me wrong.
So Trump. I'm pro Trump 100%. I'm voting for the guy. He
voted for him twice. I'll vote for him again.
I'll vote for him a third time, right? Of course. Not that I think he's a perfect person in any way. Bill Mayer. I was watching a clip from him, and he was like, I started talking to a lot of these Trump fans, and he goes, "Why do you guys like Trump?" And he goes, "They all tell me the same thing." He's like, "You don't get it. We don't like Trump. We just like the fact that he's a big fu to the system." And we're like, exactly, right? That's to me that it is. Where do you think Trump messed up?
Where did he mess up? I think the problem is, and I've actually talked to General Mike Flynn about this quite a bit as well. I think the problem is he trusted the swamp. He went in and he's like, all right, we're going to bring in John Bolton, who's a terrible guy to bring in. We're going to bring in a lot of these guys that have been in DC their whole life. And I think that's where he messed up is in his appointments. I think if he did a better job in his appointments, then he could have been in a better situation. But I think here's the problem too, is the FBI, the DOJ, and the intelligence agencies, they didn't want to let him be in charge, right? He names Flynn National Security Advisor, so they try to figure out how to use the FBI to take out Flynn. There's a quote about on when the FBI took Flynn out, they're like, what are we going to do? Are we going to get him to lie, or are we going to try and get him to do? So it's like they were basically had the idea of we're not going to let this guy hold power. So he did have that going. Our intelligence agencies have too much power. It is a huge problem.
Well, I think Rand Paul, well, both of them, but Rand Paul specifically, he's been all about that whole thing, right, with the Patriot Act and all those things. So comparing.
So I think his appointments were bad, but I think he also wasn't set up to win. I guess that's the point I'm making.
Okay,
go ahead.
Okay, so comparing back to the Roman Empire, you said we're in this third stage crisis?
Third century crisis.
Okay, so third century crisis.
It's around 192 to 284.
So what happens next? What happens next in Rome? What happens next now? What do you think?
So in 284, there's a new emperor that takes power named Diocletian.
Okay.
And the thing Diocletian does is, I guess the first thing that's not so good is whenever things weren't going well in Rome, Rome would take a minority group and they'd kind of go after that group of people. So he goes after the Christians, which isn't a good part of what he does. The other parts of what he does is good.
But why do they go after minority groups?
Because why they would go after minority groups is basically to unite everybody against that group, right? Do you get what I'm saying? An us versus them mentality, right?
Got it. Okay.
And because Christians were only 2% of the empire at this point in time, but it was a group that he could unite everybody against because it's still a pagan empire at this point in time. So that's the one thing he does that's not so good. But the things that he does, which are very good, is he creates something called the tetrarchy, or rule by four. So there's 2 senior emperors and 2 junior emperors. There's a senior emperor in the east and a senior emperor in the west, and a junior emperor on each side. So he actually divides the empire between East and West because it was huge. You couldn't rule this thing. Now, the reason I think our Constitution already handles that, and that's where the 10th Amendment comes in, states' rights. It shouldn't be a direct federalist system. We should have more of a states' rights situation. So that in our Constitution should already be handled. The other thing he does is he starts standardizing currency again because he's like, we need to get back on standard currency because the inflation is what's killing us. Another thing he does as well is he takes the military and divides it. He takes half of the military and puts them on the borders, and the other half he brings into, the territories where they, the garrisons where they actually should have been inside, the Roman Empire. What had happened previously is you would have them stationed different places with their general, and their general would raise an army and bring them in. So he reorganizes the army so that this problem stops happening, and we're handling the borders. So those are the 2 major things. He also handles taxation and stuff like that as well. But those 2 major things give the Roman Empire stability because it should have fallen in the late 280s.
And it didn't.
And it lasts until 476 because the emperors after him don't follow his policies and just keep doing the same things again. So he creates stability pretty much through the rule of Constantine, which he becomes emperor in 305 until I think 330 or something around there. So you have real stability from him through Constantine, and then you get the same problems and the barbarians coming in off the borders. The inflation goes up again, and it really causes the fall of the Western Empire.
Okay. So
my point...
What happens in America?
hard currency, which I think is one of it. I don't know if it's Bitcoin. I don't know if it's gold. I don't know what it is. But if we keep doing this inflationary thing, it's not going to last. It's going to be painful as hell, right? Because if we're living off of borrowed time, right? We're living off of money we don't have. To get back to something standard, we're not going to be able to live as, like we are right now.
Dude, we're the most, like, America is the most powerful empire, whatever you want to call it. The most powerful governmental organization that has ever existed in the history of time ever, right? Like, it is so far beyond what Rome was. Like, Rome more territorially, right? Obviously. But, like, America is so powerful.
Yeah.
Right. And, like, the only way, like, I have not studied history nearly as much as you have, but the one thing that I have studied is money, right? Like,
money is the number one thing now.
Money. And it's like, dude, like, everyone's like, nothing backs the US dollar. And I'm like, yes, nothing technically backs the US dollar except for the greatest military power in all of existence, right? It's like, that's what's backing it. And
it's the full faith and credit of the US government, what they say is passing it.
Right. But it's all debt anyway. So it's all made up, right? So money isn't real. Money's debt, literally. Like, actually, like, if you have a dollar bill in your hand, that is not money. It is a debt note, right? So you have this to where it's like, in order to fund that, they have to print money. And they have to continue to print money to do all the other things. And so it's like, we keep this up to have the money, but we have the money to keep this up. And it's like that. So in my head, I don't think you can revert back. I think the dollar has to fall.
Well, I think that then it has to be something. Is that thing Bitcoin? Like, the thing that scares me is like a central bank digital currency. That scares me because then they're controlling everything you do.
I agree with you. I'm completely on the Bitcoin train, right?
Yeah.
I think
we need something standard, or we're not going to get back to
Okay, but my question is can that happen without the US dollar falling?
I don't have an answer to that. I'm not an economics person, but to me, I think if you handle money, you handle a lot of things. Because the thing you have to look at as well, what we're doing on the world stage, we're also teaching people that the US dollar is a weapon, whether it's sanctions, whether there's other different things happening. So that's why we're forcing, that's where BRICS came from, these other different currencies. If we lose the petrodollar, like if they stop trading oil futures and oil in the dollar, overnight you're going to be like living in a cardboard box. Right. Like, stuff's going to change dramatically.
Right. But it has to be replaced with something.
Right. And BRICS is like, it's on its way there. But I think the thing people don't understand is there's no treasuries being traded in BRICS yet. So until there becomes a treasury market in BRICS, it doesn't have the ability, and that's going to take years to create. Until there's a treasuries futures market, BRICS can't really make that kind of a jump.
Yeah. And keep in mind, like, I think the US dollar.
Do you know what BRICS is, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I hate using acronyms so people don't understand it.
Yeah. So the 5 countries. Well, now there's more than that, but they came together.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
it's like Brazil, Russia, India, China. Is that what it is?
Yeah, and then
South Africa.
But there's a couple more. I feel like that joined it.
Well, there's a lot more, but those are the ones where the letters in BRICS come from.
Together, right? But I feel like I actually think the US dollar is a lot stronger than people think it is, right? And keep in mind, like, I'm very pro Bitcoin. I'm like, you know what? I'm ready for the system to crash. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't actually want the system to crash. I just don't think there's any other way. But I think the US dollar is a lot stronger than people realize. But, like, studying the Roman Empire and then looking at our current situation here, right? I think you summed it up very well. We have a border issue. Like, it is a major issue, and I think it's by design. And then you've got insane power of the federal government, right? Where a lot of states' rights don't exist anymore. Right. And then you do have this money printer.
So there's another problem too that's part of it too. Do you know who Cloward and Piven are? So I forget the one's first name, but the woman's first name is so she's Frances Fox Piven, and the other guy is so it's Cloward and Piven are the two people. Okay. And in the 60s, they created this idea of the way that you're going to basically bring down the U.S. system of government is through actually like overwhelming the welfare state. And that's something that they see in the late empire as well, because now in 212, when you give all these people citizenship, well, one of the number one things you got as a citizen was the grain dole. So they would feed you. So that's also the other problem our immigration problem creates right now. And this is very much out of the Cloward and Piven playbook. And that's why I think part of what we're dealing with is a like a Marxist revolution, because what they're trying to do is through bringing these people in, giving them tens of thousands of dollars, giving them health care. They don't have buy-in into the system. Yeah. You're overwhelming the welfare state too.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with that. 100%. But that still comes back to a money issue.
Right.
Because
But it is another part of the game board, though. I think it's important to point out.
So what are the scenarios here? Like, because like in my head, I'm like, whatever it is, I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think Trump gets back in. Actually, let's start there. Do you think Trump gets back in?
I think so. Here's my thought. I'm really interested to, I don't know, when are people going to hear this, by the way?
I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Okay. So he may be in jail by the time, maybe not in jail yet, but I know the New York trial is happening. So there could be criminal charges that, I don't know, Michael Cohen really lied badly, and they found that he stole probably about 60 grand from Trump.
Actually, I think it's more than that.
Yeah, well, it's at least 60 grand is what they found. Yeah. So I still think they're going to try to find a way to put him in jail this year. I do think I think that's their goal, man.
Really? You think he's going to jail?
The problem is, and this is what they don't consider, what problem does that create? Unless that's the reason they want to. Like, because, do you get what I'm saying? Like, there's so many, do you know what a Hegelian dialectic is? So George Frederick Hegel is this philosopher, and he builds off of the philosophy of Marxism. Mm-hmm. And what he basically says is you have a result that you want in mind, and you create these two things that come against each other to create the result. So do they want people to create a problem? So they can say, oh, those bad Republicans or those bad MAGA people or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So, like, there's a lot of weird things that could happen this year. Like, you get what I'm saying?
But let's pretend that happens.
Yeah.
Right? Which I don't think it does, right? I think...
You imagine he gets reelected from jail and he's like Nelson Mandela? That would be the most He'd love it, too. He would love it.
But, like...
But does the presidency matter anymore? That's the question.
I'm pro people, right? Like,
same here.
Like, I do hate the fact that it's Democrat versus Republican, right? Because
that's just the visual game, though. It's actually globalists versus the populists.
Oh, and I agree with that as well. But like when we are like, oh, Democrats are bad or Republicans are bad or like whatever, I'm just like, it's not that simple.
It's the wrong battle,
right? Exactly, right? It's like but I think that there are enough people that don't like Trump that are like, they think Trump is a horrible human being. They would never imagine voting for him. They can't imagine like ever being on Trump's side. Mm-hmm. That if Trump gets put in jail, go, yo, wait a second, what just happened, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like you got Mark Cuban, who like literally hates, I mean, like is no fan of Trump in any way, shape, or form, coming out and being like, hey, this trial is a complete politically motivated. It's a whole sham, right? Sure. Basically, right? So like, I feel like putting Trump in jail
makes him a martyr
of problems. He already is a martyr.
Was a political martyr.
That much more of it, right?
Yeah.
Like it is and like, it's like, okay, what? Like, you know what I'm saying? And nothing, every time that they've like convicted him of something, every time that they put something on him, his poll numbers just go up. Now, I know you can't really trust the polls, but like, and whatever. But
sure.
Like, Trump's support doesn't seem to be slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it makes way more sense for them to just have an election and just make sure that he doesn't win it.
But then I guess, like, how do people feel about, like, you have 2020, you have what people felt about 2022 in Georgia. Mm-hmm. Do people have any faith in elections anymore at that point? I think that's the problem you run into is if Trump loses in 2024, like, you're going to have a lot of people saying, like, does this even matter? Like, I think
and by the way,
yeah,
I have very little faith in the system, mm-hmm. right? And like I've said, I'm like, if Trump doesn't win in 2024, I just probably won't ever vote in the presidential election again. I'll only vote in locals, right? Because I'm like, okay, clearly it doesn't matter. But also, I feel like the consequences of that happening are way less or are way more in favor of the people that are against Trump than putting him in jail, right? Like you see what I'm saying? I'm like, I feel like the repercussions.
I think they don't consider that. I think they don't consider that. They're just like, orange man bad. Their eyes are red, running out of, you know what I mean?
I think the people that are against Trump are very, very smart.
Yeah,
I think they're very smart.
I think they're aggressively stupid. I don't know.
Really? but I feel like you can't be, dude.
Yeah.
Like people are like, Nancy Pelosi's an idiot. I'm like, dude. Nancy Pelosi.
She's the smartest investor on the planet, apparently.
Like, Nancy Pelosi is not dumb. Like, Mitch McConnell is not dumb, right? Like, these are people, and I'm no fan of either. Like, I'm not a fan of pretty much any political party. I'm not even a fan of Trump. I'm just a fan of what he represents, right?
Right.
Like, I'm not a fan of politics. I'm a fan of Bitcoin, right? I'm a fan of Bitcoin and Jesus, right? Like, actually, Jesus and Bitcoin in that order, right? Like, that's my stance. I'm like, I serve Jesus and own Bitcoin, right? Because I'm like, those two things, like, let it all crash. But like, you look at it and you go, these people are not dumb. AOC's dumb. right?
Yeah, she's an actress.
There's a lot of politicians that are dumb, but whoever is running the country is not dumb. I also don't think Trump is dumb.
But I also think whoever's running the country, you don't know about. I
agree with that.
I think it's not even Christopher Wray and the FBI. It's the people behind Christopher Wray.
I agree with that, right? Call it whoever you want, Illuminati, like whatever.
I don't know about that. I'm just saying, like, I think the intelligence agencies pretty much run everything.
Okay, great. So, but whoever's running the country, whoever is against Trump is not dumb. I also don't think Trump is dumb. I think Trump has a temper and his anger and emotions get in the way of it.
I agree.
But I don't think Trump is dumb. I think Trump is actually very smart, right? So I think you have two very smart entities that are going after one another. And because the entity that is against Trump controls so much of the media and the perception of things, right? I think that they have done a very, very good job of framing Trump as a maniac, right? When he's not, right? He says some dumb things, but he's not a maniac. Like, he's not dumb. And so because of that, I think that because they framed it that way, I mean, look at January 6th. Oh my freaking gosh, dude. Like, the most blown out of proportion thing that is.
Don't even, so on that one, like, and that's the one where people don't talk about the whole, do you know who Lisa Fithian is?
Hold on, I don't want to go down there.
Okay.
Okay, but like, hold on.
I got some rabbit holes, man.
Right. But my point is with this is I think these two entities are smart. And I think the people that are in power right now, I think we're past the point of no return.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
As far as like, they're not trying to like restore.
No, they're creating the next thing.
Right. Whatever's coming is happening. And I don't think we're going back on that. Right. So because of that, I look at that and I go, well, what gives people, like, what gives them the best chance to keep order for long enough? And order for long enough, meaning not that they don't want chaos, because they do, but enough order, right? To like kind of transition things in without things going crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think they want riots in the streets from supporters. I don't think they want that. And
yes and no.
But why would you think that they would?
Because then they can use that destabilization to basically further their means. Like, they could say, "Oh, these Trump supporters are bad. Let's arrest them all." You get what I'm saying? Like, it also it creates that opening.
Start doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, Tucker Carlson, who I have my thoughts on him. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, you're awesome.
I like a lot of what he says, and then there's other stuff I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah, but I also feel that way about like Cuomo, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, like even him.
No, I really can't stand Cuomo. But
also
I like most of what Tucker says.
Yeah, okay. But like, I mean, Tucker's like, hey, they put Trump in jail. I will lead the riots in the streets, right? I mean, this is.
I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, like he is like, if they put him in jail, like I will be leading them.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't think that this is a Black Lives Matter level size protest. Like, I think there's like. I think that that's on the brink of war, which, by the way, I'm not advocating for. Right? I'm not in any way, shape, or I'm insanely pro peace, insanely pro peace. Right? But I don't understand. I don't understand how Biden stays in, but I also cannot see Trump getting in. But I also know that those are the only two candidates. The RFK is not an option here.
No,
they might use him to swing an election one way or the other, right? To get some.
And I've got some feelings on RFK too, but so like neither here nor there.
But like. Why would putting Trump in jail be better than just letting the election playing out and making sure that he doesn't win?
I don't have an answer to that one. I just kind of think that they're.
So why do you think that they're going to try to put him in jail?
Have you heard how the media is charging though? I think they love it, man. They're so excited about it. Like they love saying, you know, Trump is a dictator and he's this and he's that, and like what better thing for them to do than to. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's the thing to do. Yeah. I think that a lot of these people are stupid. So I think they're charging at something because that's what they want. Like, you know, if you look at half of these talking heads on MSNBC, it's like, you know, Rachel Maddow loves it, man. Like, it's like, they're not telling the truth. They're doing whatever they feel like they need to do. And I think if you want to look at.
To be fair, though, and I just want to be very clear, I don't think anybody on the right's telling the truth either.
Oh, no. I tuned out Fox News about 4 years ago. You know what I mean?
Dude. Like, most of my news I get from X. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? Like, I'm like, it's like I listen to what Elon Musk tweeting memes or Joe Rogan, right? Like that's about, but like, I think it's all made up, right? Like, I think it's all for show. Yeah. Does that make sense? It does. And I think we get so upset about other countries and the news they cover and everything else. And it's like, we're like, oh, Brazil, they want to get rid of X. And it's like, do you know what your government does to you? Like, have you heard of Operation Mockingbird? Like, you know, it's like, I think people don't look at it the right way. But I think another thing that's important to kind of bring back to Rome on this, so the Praetorian Guard were the people responsible for protecting the emperor. And oftentimes they were the ones killing the emperor. And if you want to look at that, you could say, like, you know, the intelligence agencies, the FBI, like, they're a new Praetorian Guard. Because we don't exactly... Maybe we do. I don't know.
I don't think we assassinate people like we used to. I think it's more of a character assassination.
Like in America or just around the world?
I'm saying in America, right?
Because I'm like...
There's some helicopter crashes and stuff we won't get into that people may have killed people. But I'm saying like here in America, I think like if you look at like post 1969, because 1969 was a rough year if you want to look it up. I don't think we physically kill leaders anymore. I think what we actually do is we character assassinate and destroy them. You know, we plant some porn on their computer, or we put them in the wrong situation, or we have somebody tell a story about them. We character assassinate. And I think what you're seeing is intelligence agencies manage that because they are out of control. People hear the word deep state and they're like, oh, it's spooky. It's this. No, it's just a word for people that their career, like when you're in the FBI and you're in there for 30 years, well, it doesn't matter what political party's in there. Yeah. When you're in the DOJ and you're there for 30 years, it doesn't matter what political party's in. You just do what you want to do. And I think that's what we're seeing is these parties that were these groups that were they're actually part of the executive branch, which is what the president is. They run the executive branch now. And the president you're seeing, you can see this with Biden. Like, you can't tell me that guy's awake. There's nobody in charge, man. That's why even when Trump got there and tried to be in charge.
I'm excited to see the debate because I want to be like, how much drugs? How much drugs are they going to have to give him?
Did you see the last one? He looked like he was like 3D printed with no eyelids.
Yo, I'm like, and it's only worse now, right? Like, you got to imagine he's going to be so shot up.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think the whole debate thing, it's weird that all of a sudden, like, Biden doesn't want to debate, and then all of a sudden makes a tweet that's like, I beat you twice.
But did you hear why? Now. Because they reached out to the Presidential Debates Commission and they had the rules changed. So they want no audience.
Oh, I knew that. Yeah.
They want no audience. They want it done in a studio. They want it so if one person keeps talking, they can mute their mic. So he's willing to do it now if they'll change the rules.
Yeah, which, I mean, like, whatever at this point.
I want him drug tested.
Yeah. Well, Trump, do you see Trump going off about that? He said that he was going to request it, but they also banned RFK from it.
Yeah.
So that had to happen.
Well, they didn't really ban him. They just changed the threshold of what you need for voters and basically saying, oh, we legally said you can't come. You know?
Okay. So play out a scenario where Biden stays in. Okay. So like, let's pretend. Oh, actually, one more question on this.
Okay. I don't think he makes it past June because I think they replace him with somebody.
But we're too late for that, dude.
What do you mean? They're going to replace him at the Democratic National Convention.
Who are they going to put in there?
Michelle Obama?
I mean,
with Vice President Gavin Newsom? Because here's the thing you can't do.
Gavin Newsom.
Because here's the thing you can't. Well, he's a Batman villain. He's perfect. But like the thing you can't do, like if you remove Biden, well, the person behind him is Kamala Harris. And
Trump would be. I actually
so
think Trump would win.
You can't. Number one, she's unelectable. But number two, you can't skip Kamala Harris because it has to be a woman in this case. So I think if you bring in Michelle Obama, there's a lot of talk of she doesn't want to be there. And I've talked to a lot of Republican insiders about this.
But like, they would have done that months ago, dude.
They can still do it. They can still do it in the Democratic National Convention. They can do it. He could be like,
I'll bet you $100.
Yo, man, my hairy legs, I can't do it. Corn Pop told me no. Michelle's going to come out. Her and Gavin.
Okay, listen. I dislike Gavin Newsom in so many ways, but dude, that guy, you can't tell me he's not smart.
He is a Batman villain, man.
It would be I'm down for that movie. Right? Like, you know what I mean?
It'd be exciting, at least.
It would be so crazy.
The end of days would be fun.
And what I'm saying is like I'm at the point where I'm just like I'm in this ride for the show.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't think Trump gets in. I don't. So yeah. I'm in it for the show at this point. I'm like whoever they put in. But first question would be like, do you think there's any chance they assassinate Trump?
I think they could
before an election.
I think they could. I know Tucker's talked about that, and other people like Andrew Tate's even talked about it. He's like, you know, like when they can't cancel you, when they can't put you in jail, the next step is to assassinate you. So I guess they could. That could definitely happen. But I think the problem is too, though, Josh. I think we put way too much attention on national politics, and I think the thing that the pandemic proved to us is how much your state representatives matter, how much your mayor matters.
Don't get off the topic here. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I'm hopeful, man.
Okay, listen, and I'm hopeful for local elections as well. So okay, so we think Trump's probably not going to get assassinated, and I agree with that.
Yeah,
I don't think he's going to go to jail. You do, cool, great. Let's play this out and say let's say Biden gets reelected. All right.
Michelle Obama gets elected.
No, okay. Well, let's pretend it's Biden. Okay. Is there a silver lining to this somehow? Like, is it if Biden gets reelected, is there good that comes from this? Meaning, like, is there things that they're going to stop doing now that they don't have to try to get him elected again? Is there any positive of this happening?
I think the positive is to do something like that. Like, it would be so brazen that I think it would just, the number of people it would wake up to your politicians are screwing you would be nuts. So I think from that perspective, I'm afraid of what laws they try to push through immediately because they do rule by executive order. But I think it would the number of people it would wake up if they threw Trump in jail and Michelle Obama became president after they removed Joe Biden. I just think the number of people that would look at that and be like, you see what just happened? And none of us actually wanted that. Yeah. I think that's what you're looking at.
Well, but
and don't get me wrong. I love a good I love a good conspiracy, by the way. So don't get me wrong. I'm a conspiracy therapist.
A conspiracy therapist. Oh man. Okay. Interesting. And so like I'm very excited for this year. I really, really am. Do you think, just briefly, do you think that crypto has any role in swaying an election one way or the other?
I don't know if it has a role, but
Trump has certainly come out in the last couple of weeks very pro crypto all of a sudden.
I know I don't think it has a role, but I think it has a big ability to give us some stability. I think that's a huge thing.
But like, do you think the topic of it, like the president's stance, like Biden being against it, and Elizabeth, it's so funny. There's a hold on. Okay. There's a meme coin. So like I love crypto, right?
Yeah.
And there's meme coins are like popping off or whatever. And there was one that was Elizabeth Warren, and I'm like, yes, yes, So anyway, but Elizabeth Warren is very much against it. Biden's against crypto. Trump clearly.
Well, no, Biden's not against crypto. He wants to regulate it and own it.
But like as far as the election is concerned, as someone who is very, very heavily in the crypto, like I am in the crypto world heavily, it is very obvious that the Democrats are anti-crypto and that Trump has now taken the stance of being the crypto guy. Meaning, like, if you want,
did you buy one of his NFTs?
I do.
Okay,
I own one of his NFTs simply because I'm like, yes, Trump. Like, I just thought it was hilarious, right? But like that's the thing. Like, my stance on Trump is, I go, he's so funny. I'm going to enjoy the entertainment.
Well, he's got comic timing. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, so I think that the thing you have to look at here, a Republican presidential nominee has never spoken at the Libertarian Convention. Donald Trump's speaking there.
Really?
So is RFK, but Donald Trump is speaking there.
Interesting.
To me, I think that's a big deal because he understands that the Republican Party is leaning more libertarian than the traditional conservative, because I think your traditional conservative party, your neocons, want to blow up the world anyway. Yeah. So I think that says a lot, and I think it also says a lot about your freedom of currency, because most libertarians are very Bitcoin positive.
Yeah.
So I
don't
know if it exactly swings the election, but I think the fact that Trump is doing the NFTs, that he's willing to speak at the Libertarian Convention, that says a lot. Republicans don't do that.
Dude, this episode is going to get so censored. It's ridiculous. Okay, so shifting gears to religion and the role that plays, because I am fascinated by this, because I feel like the more someone studies history in general, typically speaking, the more they, at least in my experience of talking to people, I don't think this is a law of the universe or anything.
Yeah.
But like typically they have they understand why they believe what they believe a lot more than perhaps the person that has not, right?
Right.
And you've obviously studied history. You're Catholic, Scientology, entrepreneur. Fill me in. Like, how does this? Yeah, how did we get to this conclusion?
I don't understand the question.
How did you? Tell me more about your faith. What made you pick Scientology? What made you stick with Catholicism? Did you ever go away from Catholicism and come back because you grew up that way? Where does that all fit in?
Okay, so so I grew up Presbyterian.
Oh, interesting.
And when I was in like fourth grade, I decided that I had studied a lot of that was from going from public school to private school. So I had started studying where religion actually came from. Mm-hmm. And once I learned more of where traditional religion came from, the Catholic Church, Catholic meaning universal. That's what the word actually means. So to me, I wanted to get back to, this is fourth grader, by the way. I've always been kind of weird. So I always wanted to get back to what does it traditionally mean, right? So I actually became Catholic, was baptized and all that in fourth grade. And my parents were kind of like, what are you doing, you crazy kid?
You.
Yeah, my parents gave me a lot of freedom.
That's good.
And then
a young Sheldon.
I've always been I've never watched that show. I've always been a weird kid. I get people telling me I'm an old soul.
My wife and I just we turned something on in the background or whatever, and that one came up as recommended.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't even know why we started watching it. It's kind of like in the background thing, but there's this episode. So the premise is that he's basically a super genius at like 9 years old, right? And there's one of the episodes where he starts studying religion, and because he doesn't believe he believes in science, right? So he doesn't really believe in religion. But then he calls up this Jewish guy and he goes, "Hello, I would like to become Jewish." And he's like, "Oh, why do you want to become Jewish?" And he goes, "Well, because all of the great scientists of our time are all Jewish. So I want to stack the odds in my favor."
Oh my gosh.
That's pretty good. So anyway, continue.
So for me, a lot of my moral framework and all that is, I think church is an important part of my kid's life as well. Like, I think it's just important to have that framework for your family. And I believe that's where we came from, right? I think that's a really important part of it. The thing that was hard for me is, when my mom had a stroke, in 2010, so this is a long time ago now, like, I was still going to church. I was still practicing. But the problem is, like, I don't know how to say this without saying weird. Like, I wasn't mentally doing well, if that makes sense. Yeah. I was not really doing well because my family's always been very close. Yeah. And I ended up reading the book Dianetics. Okay. And because Dianetics is the study of the mind and how it works. And it's really interesting when you read Hubbard's work about, like, how the brain works and how it stores these experiences, and how if you remove these experiences, well, you remove, like, you're not removing, like, remembering it, you're removing, like, what you do unconsciously. So that made me very interested of, okay, well, if I can handle that, then I think I can do better. And for me, the way that actually practicing Scientology and, practicing what Dianetics is, that was able to help me, like, actually feel better. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Handle a lot of, like, negative thoughts, a lot of those things that, like, I just could not get rid of. Like, spiritually, like, this is what I believe, but physically I wasn't doing well. Right. And so it really helped me to handle a lot of the things that were going wrong with me.
Okay. So let's start with the Catholicism piece. Yeah. I grew up in the church, not Catholic, but technically we went to a Baptist church, although it was not really about it. I mean, I would say I'm evangelical, right? I believe in the Bible, right? That's what I believe, right? Yeah. And I believe in Jesus. I believe that he was the Son of God. I believe he died for our sins on the cross. I believe he rose again on the third day. I believe in the Trinity, right? Like, I believe in what the Bible says, right? But there was a time, I grew up in the church because I had to go to church, not because I wanted to go to church, right? So that's
a little bit different than me, because it was me. I was like, oh, I want that. My parents were like, you're crazy. But anyway, continue.
No, so, like, I grew up and I was like, conceptually, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. God, religion. Yeah. You do it, whatever. But then I left, and, like, I never was like, God, you don't exist. It was more of like, I'm poor and I don't like my life. And so I was like, God, I'll come back to you once I get rich and need you again, type of deal. Right. Yeah. And terrible idea, by the way. And I like to say that, like, entrepreneurship became my religion, money became my God, right? For a time there. I never did not acknowledge God. But then after several years, my brother died, helicopter crash, that changed things and came back. Eventually I come back to God, and then specifically come back to Jesus, recommit my life. Here we are, right? So I went through this phase of, like, okay, I grew up with it. I knew the book very, very well. To me, religion was a bunch of rules. I hate rules. Cool. I'm going to leave. But now I understand it, and I come back, and I chose it. My faith is mine, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a reason I chose it, right? And I understand what I believe. But I've also dedicated a lot of time, particularly in the last 18 months, but also growing up, just to different religions. So I understand Catholicism, and I understand, and right now I'm studying Islam a lot, right? And understanding what goes into that and all that. Why?
I studied Judaism a lot, believe it or not.
Really?
Just because I was interested.
So that's my next one. That's what I'm
my undergrad thesis is on the different sects within Judaism and what they're looking for in a Messiah, because they were all looking for totally different things. But anyway, continue.
Interesting. Well, I think the most fascinating thing about Islam was how many things that were similar to Christianity in Islam. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of similarities in a lot of what they believe. But anyway,
well, then Ishmael being the son of Abraham.
Well, and also just, like, there's core things that are the same, and then core things that you're like, yo, what? How did we? Whoa, right?
Yeah.
But side note, they're, like, fascinating. They believe Jesus is not the Messiah, right? They believe, Muhammad.
He's a prophet, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. But they do believe that Jesus, he was a prophet, and they always say, Jesus, peace be with him. Peace be with him. Yeah,
I don't know. It's out of my head.
But they believe that he is going to be the one that comes back to earth and defeats the Antichrist. But he's not God, though, which is super fascinating. Anyway, Catholicism.
Yeah,
why did you pick Catholicism, or what made sense? Like, why Catholicism?
Well, because my parents were always like, Vacation Bible School and all those kind of things as a kid, and so, like, I always understood, like, biblical stories, but to me, like, I wanted to once again, I'm a weird kid, man.
No, I get it, yeah.
I'm such a weird kid. Like I'm reading like Tom Clancy books at like 8 years old.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to know like, well, when the church started, what did those people believe? Right. And, the Catholic Church was kind of a lot of where things started. Then you had the schism in, I think, 1053 between East and West. So like things gradually over time change. So like to me, it was just, well, I just wanted to see what they believed in the beginning. And that's why I ended up going to Catholicism.
If I were to summarize Catholicism's origin compared to what most people would think of as traditional Christianity per se.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in the Middle Ages that weren't so good. So like,
for sure. But like what would you agree with the statement that essentially if you go back to the statement of Peter with Christ, when Peter said, when Jesus looks at him and goes, who do you say that I am? Right. And Peter says, you are you are Jesus Christ, the one true God, basically. Right. And he goes, on this I will build my church, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be the split of where Catholicism went this way and the other religions and sects inside of Christianity went this way, right? And the Pope and all those things come from that concept. Yes?
Yeah, but I think that the thing that's interesting too is you also like, I think Catholicism kind of went through like a 1,000-year journey to get to Vatican II in the 60s as well. Because if you look at it, once again, as I mentioned, early Catholicism comes from, an emperor picking up Christian religion, the first one being Constantine. And he doesn't make it a Christian empire. It doesn't happen until the 370s under Theodosius that it actually becomes a Christian empire. There wasn't a separation between spiritual power and temporal power, meaning the Roman emperor was in charge of things spiritual and things temporal. Temporal meaning things of the world. So you do have this journey of the Middle Ages where the Pope is kind of running a lot of things, and it takes a while before spiritual and temporal start to separate. So you do have a lot of things that I don't think are so great that happens in that time period. But, I still, for me, that's still, the writing of the Bible that I, once again, because I'm somebody I've studied, like when were the different translations done? How were they done? Like, so for me, that's more about what it's about is like, where did the translation of the Bible come from? How's it started in Greek, and then from Greek it went to Latin. So for me, that's what I'm looking at.
You can still go back to the original text of it. Right. But so I'm coming at this strictly from a curiosity standpoint.
Yeah.
Right? Like to understand, because you know Catholicism way better than I do. So you believe in the concept of the Pope then, right?
I do, though this one isn't so great. Okay, so this one's a communist.
Okay, so
I kind of have some issues with the current one.
So there's my question on that, which is if the Pope is supposed to be essentially this God-ordained, like,
right? But I think the thing you have to look at too, people are flawed, right? Like people can do bad things. So like,
yeah, but like, isn't the whole
like
premise...
even if the Pope's divinely inspired, he's still a man. Like only God's infallible.
So, but how, like, isn't the whole concept, though, of Catholicism that you basically have the Pope, which is the leader, and he's the one that basically goes and talks with God, right?
Well, no, you have your individual relationship with God.
Well, right.
And we have discernment to see, like, what's happening,
Okay, so explain how you see the Pope, like, the Pope's role and the role that he plays in the Catholic Church.
So it's the person that basically decides, like, if this doctrine is what we believe, so they go back to the College of Cardinals and decide if, like, this is something we're going to issue. But as I said, I'm very concerned about, there's talk of Antichrist and all this different stuff. Like, you can have bad people. Like, you can have, like, is he a black Pope? I don't know. But black Pope not meaning like a black person, but black Pope meaning the opposite of good. Yeah. So, like, that can happen too. Like, it can happen. So, like, and there were time periods, during the Avignon papacy what's that around? Anyway, I don't remember the exact time period. There were two popes for a period of time. So it's like there can be, people are fallible because people can want power. So if God isn't fallible
in the Catholic religion, because I want to go very basic here for a second, in the Catholic religion, is there other holy texts that are deemed infallible besides the Bible?
The Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is often like, like the beliefs and what they mean. And like, because we take the Bible and we build off of that. And that's where a lot of that comes. So the catechism would be the other thing that's considered infallible.
Okay. And so then with these doctrines and these things that the Pope ultimately determines as whether or not it is correct or not, is that the right word terminology?
Yeah, I can say he adjudicates.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if he's messed up,
Josh, I'm telling you, man, I'm struggling with this current pope.
okay,
I'll be honest with you.
But like,
because a lot of what he said, it sounds woke.
But just like the concept, I mean, yeah, but like where I have many things where I don't understand Catholicism, but I have many things where I don't understand many religions, right?
Yeah, sure.
So like this, but I'm like, it seems that Catholicism would go and basically take this role and basically be like, hey, this role is by this guy that gets to determine not what is right and wrong, but basically what we accept is true and how we should act and how we should live during this time period. And he has direct communication with God, and he goes back to all these different things. And then like the whole church basically runs and operates off of that. And then it's like, we look at what's happening, not even just with this guy, but just in general, like, it seems that this religion...
But that's a split within Catholicism right now, too. There are a lot of people that believe what I believe, that there's something up with this pope.
But my point is that the religion allows
like how strange
is
it that we had a pope retire? That doesn't typically happen. They usually die.
Well,
with Pope Benedict.
But my point is that the religion itself is based on a premise that a man, like that a human, like gets to ultimately go and decide during a time period what is right or wrong, and like how a whole congregation or a whole religion acts. And that to me seems flawed. Like that, like why would that be a thing when no matter who, like you said, people make mistakes? It's like, exactly. So why would there be a singular person that has that power or responsibility on earth versus just the Bible, or just this is what it is?
I don't have an answer.
Okay, yeah.
I don't have a good answer.
Okay, yeah, because that's I feel like that's
I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Yeah, because I think that's the biggest thing that I wrestle with Catholicism. Like, because like everything else is like, I don't want to say semantics because that's not entirely true, but it's like everything else can be, you could argue the pros or cons of it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you can argue the pros or cons of a lot of things that the Bible teaches too, right? Like, of like, oh, is that really this? But like that to me just seems that. So with Catholicism and also then Scientology, moving to that topic. Because I don't know that much about Scientology. I know Grant Cardone's a Scientologist.
Yeah.
Right? And you're a Scientologist.
Yeah.
Cool, great. So like, what does Scientology say that would differ from Catholicism? And does Catholicism as a religion as a whole have a problem with Scientology or not?
As far as I know, Catholicism doesn't have a problem with Scientology. Nobody's told me that. So,
okay.
And I guess an easy way to explain it is, as a Scientologist, you believe that there's what are called 8 dynamics, or 8 parts of your life. You have you as an individual, you as, like your family, you as the group. There's 8 of them, right? The final one of those is the kind of the spiritual element. The spiritual element is where Catholicism comes in for me. That's how I look at what I believe spiritually. A lot of what I learned in Scientology is how I handle other people and how I handle, the science of the brain, and a lot of that stuff. So for me, that's where that comes in. What I believe spiritually is handled by, as I mentioned, there's 8 dynamics. There's you, there's your family, there's the groups you're in, there's mankind, there's, the earth, there's animals, there's, your spiritual being and stuff like that. So like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes actually a lot of sense, actually.
Like you could look at it as a circle going out, right? And, kind of have like you in the middle and all these circles coming off you. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. So,
because like, we're not like one thing as a person. We're all these different things.
I 100% believe that. I've never heard someone claim 2 religions at the same time, if that makes sense. And so like,
well, because Scientology is non-denominational though. You don't have to like,
and so that's why I'm saying, is Scientology technically a religion, or is it just more of a philosophy on life?
So we call Scientology a applied religious philosophy. Okay. So that's, you know what I mean? So like,
makes sense.
Like, yes, we can, from Christianity, we get our morality and things like that. But like Scientology actually gives you a lot of tools to handle life. Like, how do you communicate better? How do you, judge the type of people you should have in your life versus the people you should spend less of your time with? How do we handle the mind and the things it's doing to the body? So a lot of those things, it's an applied religious philosophy.
Could you think about it like the concept of, it's fascinating. So like if you look at the Bible or traditional religious texts, they're written a long time ago, right?
Sure.
And so it's like you have this wisdom that is timeless, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. And then you also have modern society.
Well, I think there's also a general truth across religions as well.
In what sense?
And like a lot of times a sense of morality and like things that are just true. I don't think, we have, nothing's exactly the same. Like, do you know what zeitgeist is?
Zeitgeist?
Zeitgeist is a lot of like our religious stories are similar and stuff like that. So I think as like the human experience, there's a lot of things that are similar among us.
Well, I would agree with that.
Anyway, sorry, I took you off your point, but go ahead.
No. That's actually interesting. Yeah, we're
because like even like Gilgamesh and like Noah are very similar stories. So there's a lot of things I think as people we've experienced and we don't know how to describe them.
So like with that concept, is that like saying like, hey, if you read the Bible and you look at the stories in the Bible, like the flood and Noah, or like like the Nephilim and like things of that nature.
Yeah.
If you look at biblical, the biblical context versus maybe like Greek mythology or versus like these different things, like they all account for the same things but explain them differently.
It could be because I think if you look at it, like we have people don't, number one, a lot of stories were passed down, right? They were passed down through generations. Like you look at the Iliad, like, it's not a religious text, but you look at the Iliad, it was like Homer wasn't one guy. He was likely 8 different guys that passed it down over time. So like, I think a lot of these, especially the Old Testament, like we've experienced a lot of these stories and maybe we don't have the same words to describe them or the same concepts to describe them. I think once you get in the New Testament, it's a different thing. But I think for a lot of like Old Testament things, they are similar human experience.
The difference with that. What do you mean?
Well, because when you're looking at the New Testament is pretty much the experience of Christ and the disciples. I think a lot of that like isn't always similar across, right? Because as you mentioned, even Islam looks at it differently. But I think a lot of Old Testament, like it's so long ago, we have similar human story, if that makes sense.
Okay. And then, so if you were to look at the Bible and you break it into two segments, right? Old Testament, New Testament.
Sure.
You would, what I'm hearing is you're saying like Old Testament, there's a lot of texts and books and stories from a lot of different religions, from a lot of different parts of the world that probably have, or that share similar accounts, or different accounts of similar situations.
Yeah,
right?
No, it's the concept called zeitgeist. There's like a really cool, there's a really cool documentary about it.
Okay.
A lot of those stories are like human stories told in a different way.
Okay. And then the New Testament in the Bible specifically is more focused on the story of Jesus.
Correct. Yeah. And the disciples and the early church and things like that.
So would Scientology just be essentially like, hey, maybe some ancient wisdom, not updated, but like put in such a way that now that we have science to just determine and explain a lot of the things that were mysteries back then, right? Bring some context on how we can use those more applicably, like in today's
Yes and no, because Hubbard he was an engineer, so he wanted to know how things worked. So that was a lot of like how his work on Dianetics came, as he was researching after World War II, he was researching, well, how do we help these guys with shell shock? And he was able to, through a lot of the processes and things he developed, help people. And he was like, oh, I think I'm starting to understand how the mind works. So a lot of it started with his research on the mind and how it works. And it's different in how people look at it in psychology and things like that, where a lot of times man is mud. We are a spiritual being, and if we can help the mind, we can help the person.
And you do believe that there is something besides just this physical body?
Yes. Absolutely, man. Like without that, like you are the thing that's not the spiritual body. Like the spiritual body is like,
the core crux.
Well, it's the thing you get around in, but like you are a spiritual being. Like you are a spirit.
I agree with you 100%. You're familiar with Tom Bilyeu, of course. Empire.
Yeah. I don't really look at much of what he's doing.
Yeah. So he's fascinating.
I've interviewed him. Cool guy. Yeah.
You interviewed him?
Yeah. We did a whole episode about Star Wars.
He's like on my bucket list. Was that
I don't consume.
Or a while ago, or?
I was like 5. I don't consume 5 years ago. I don't consume a lot of other people's content.
Yeah,
I'm just
I'm the same way.
Reading books about the Roman Empire. I'm a plane on the way here. I'm finishing a 20-hour book on Julius Caesar.
That's crazy, dude. Well, okay, so Tom Bilyeu is someone I have a lot of respect for, like a tremendous amount. I think he's brilliant. Obviously, sold a company for over $1 billion. But he does not believe that there's anything outside of this body, right? So he doesn't believe that there's a soul behind it.
That's so
fascinating, right?
Right, but how do you believe? I don't understand how one can believe that. I don't.
I'm
because that's like saying man is mud, and then if you just do these couple things, like you'll be good for this lifetime, and then you live till it's all over. Like, what's the point?
Well, he believes that we have evolved. And that the primary, because I'm like, okay, well, where do you get morality? Where do you get, like, how do you answer all these questions, right? But like, he believes
because then it makes Immanuel Kant right. That like the situation you're in, you just do what you need to do to get through the situation.
So he believes that we've evolved to, like, evolution is basically evolving, like the primary driver or the stick of the future, like what we're trying to get to is we're evolving to whatever maximizes human flourishing, right? That's what he believes.
Okay.
And he believes that essentially, like, for performance and like for, basically having success in life is that the body, where this biological, body, and that it is designed for to feel personal fulfillment, right? And so your body will do, and what determines of good, and like your brain, it's all wired to do the things that will make you the most fulfilled. And whatever
just you as a person,
right? But so overall, like from a big picture perspective,
I gotta like read this now because I didn't know any of this about Tom.
Fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So overall, big picture, it's a human flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's what we're all as a species, like we're optimized for human flourishing. But then how evolution, wherever that came from, right? Like how it gets you as a person to do the things that will increase human flourishing is whatever you find most fulfilling is most in alignment with human moving human flourishing forward.
So that's different than what I would believe as a Scientologist, because I said like there's 8 parts of your life, 8 dynamics.
Yeah.
And Hubbard says that the fundamental principle of existence is to survive. But you can't just survive as you, right? You have to survive as you and the...
He agrees with that,
right?
But he would agree, but that the overarching point of not society, but as we as creatures, what's the word I just said? Anyway, like us as creatures, right? Like is to increase human flourishing as a whole.
Yeah.
And that each individual person, that the thing that drives us most in line with making that happen was what makes us most fulfilled.
So that's a little bit different than where I was going, because as I was saying, like, so there's 8 dynamics, and you want to survive as each one of those dynamics. Like somebody that takes care of animals and takes care of your family, takes care of the groups you're in, mankind. And an optimum solution meaning the best solution is the one that's the best for the most number of those dynamics in your life. If it's creating more harm than good, then what's the point as well? If it's just helping you but not helping others, what's the point?
He is saying that is fulfillment. So like if you got these 8 sectors, if you were to go and do the things that benefit all 8 of these sectors, that would be the thing that makes you most fulfilled. And so by chasing fulfillment, you will by default do the things that do the most amount of good.
I don't know if that's necessarily true though, because how would you explain a drug addict? Like that's fulfillment for them, but it's really harming a lot of people.
I'm with you on that, right? But it's fascinating because one of the interviews he did was with Jay Waller, which is one of Andrew Tate's best friends, right? And it's fascinating.
Jason Waller, or is it somebody different? I'm thinking of the BAM guy. Now is it a different guy?
No, the big construction dude, and like he's friends with Tate.
Okay, something to somebody different.
Jay Waller. Anyway, so he does that interview, and I watched like a 3-hour-long interview. It's fascinating, by the way. Fascinating.
I'll have to watch it.
It's worth it because not only do you
I'm like so interested in philosophy and study of religion and stuff.
And Jay Waller coming from his perspective of things, which by the way, after this conversation, I'm going to get messages from people. You got 27 different things wrong. So anyway, but like it's fascinating. It really, really is. But it's interesting to hear his perspective on things because he does not believe in a soul. Yeah, he literally believes this is it.
Right? How can you believe that? Like man, like that's the whole concept of man is mud. Like I don't understand it.
I'm with you, dude. But like there are a lot of people, and one of my best friends, actually the guy that built the studio, one of my best friends in the entire world. I mean, I would die for this dude in a heartbeat. Like, he was there with me at the beginning. I slept on his couch, this red leather sofa, as I was getting my entrepreneurship journey out the career. He's in the same boat. Yeah. He's like, there is nothing besides what's up right here. He's like, this is it. This is what we've got. There is no soul outside of it. And I'm like, dude, you go trip some acid or something, bro.
But I guess the reason I could never believe that. So, I had knee surgery at 19, and it was the one Tom Brady had. It was supposed to be very easy, and you recover, and you're in great shape. So they screwed up my anesthesia, and my lungs collapsed. Oh. And my blood oxygen level dropped, like, I don't know what the exact number was, but I know they couldn't get it up and they were panicking. And I found out later some of what happened, like well after the statute of limitations. I guess we could have sued him or whatever. But basically, I got last rites. The priest came in, I wasn't conscious. Like, to me, like, I've been out of body. I've experienced more. Like, I know that's BS because I've seen it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, I'm agreeing with you.
I literally got last rites and they said, he is not going to make it. I got very lucky. I did. But like, to me, like, you have a spiritual experience like that, like you can't see the opposite.
I agree. And for me, it was, the death of my brother is what ultimately led me down the path of knowing that I know that. How does, what's the question I'm trying to ask here? So you believe the concept of the Trinity, right?
Yeah.
So like 3 in 1, not 3 with one in purpose, but actually 3 beings, one entity.
God,
right?
God, Spirit, and Jesus, yeah.
Right? Like, but they're one entity, 3 different beings.
Mm-hmm.
So in the concept of like this life, do you believe what percentage of what we do in this life determines what we do in the next life?
I think a good amount of it.
Because how do you determine how do you determine what you're supposed to do?
What do you mean? Like
you have like the Scientology piece, you have the Catholicism piece, and I'm curious, like, because it's always interesting. Like recently, I've been in a debate with people as like, okay, is salvation instantaneous, right? Like if you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, you'll be saved.
So is this like the Calvinism argument, or is this something different?
No.
Because Calvinism believed in like predetermination, where like everything that you're going to do is like written down.
No. What I mean is that like, so the argument is like, okay, yes, like you would get saved, but or like yes, like you would repent and you believe in Jesus, but then like for the rest of your life, you basically have to do good works to earn your way into heaven, type of deal or whatever. Which I don't believe, by the way, right? Like I believe like instantaneously, you believe in Jesus Christ, you're saved, but also then like from that you have that kind of the set of rules, right? Or these guiding principles that you live out to become more like Christ, to follow in his ways and things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
But there's always the argument of like, how do you determine what good and bad is, what truth is, like how you should live your life and determine your life on things. When you have Scientology and when you have Catholicism, like, is there one, I'm just curious for my own sake, is there like one guiding thing of like, this is how I determine, like, dude, like you've decided that you're going to go build a business and entrepreneurship and go be pro-Trump and, you know, like do all those things where someone else would be like, oh, politics is dumb and we shouldn't do that, you know, if we believe in God or whatever. How do you ultimately determine what you're going to do?
Well, I think that gets back to the whole idea of like faith and works, which I think is kind of the separation that it sounds like we have a difference of opinion on. Like, because for me, I think like faith is important, right? And you have to have that. Like, you have to like, yes, you know, your faith in Jesus Christ that you're saved is important. But I think also like if your works disagree with that, like I think that is also a problem, right? Like I think just to have faith and say I could commit bad things all my life, like
I don't agree with that. I mean, I agree with you. I'm with.
So that's all I believe is I think it's faith and works. And if your morality should be like, your morality is like, what's the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Like, is it's good for me if it's good for preserving, you know, the environment, if it's good for preserving people? I would say is an optimum solution where it's causing, you know, the greatest number of good for the greatest number of people, then it's the right way to go about it.
Got it. And good, it would be determined by religious texts and what is revealed to you by Christ/Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, cool.
And also like how much harm does it cause though too? Like, cause I think there's a lot of things like, and Tucker's been talking a lot about like, oh, well, we had to bomb Japan because it ended the Second World War. Well, I would look at that and I would say like, sure, like maybe it ended the war, but that caused a lot of suffering. Like, I don't think that's a great thing. So I think it's also like, how much harm are you causing? People said, oh, well, the war could have went on longer. And sure, it could have, but we don't know that. I think so to just say I'm going to kill a bunch of people to end a war, like, that doesn't make any sense to me either. So I think it's the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Well, I mean, I think that's my biggest issue with the whole Ukraine situation right now is because I argue with people that are like pro-Ukraine or anti-Ukraine or whatever. Yeah. And one of the arguments is like, well, you know, we're funding Ukraine because we'd rather have the Ukrainians fight Russia, right? Than us. So like, let the Ukrainians die and not us. And I'm like, are you listening to what you're saying right now? I'm like, these are humans. Right?
They're human beings. Like, and I think the problem with that whole situation too is like that can of worms is so deep and most people don't have the whole story.
Yeah.
Like it's been for Republicans and Democrats, it's been their piggy bank for 50 years. So it's like they're just protecting their investment. And I think we're getting pulled into this whole argument about like, you know, protecting Ukraine versus not. And the reason the politicians are doing it is because they want a place to launder their money. And I think that's that argument is so deep, man. Like, do some research on Victoria Nuland and when she said, "quote F the EU," you'll find out some fun stuff.
Yeah. No, actually, I'm aware. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Okay, what's next for you, dude? You've got, I mean, gosh, you got a lot going on. So what's next for you? I'm
doubling down on building the media company side of things. So we really about 2 years ago started doing more video, and so. Growing the show we currently have. We want to start to bring more shows under the umbrella. We're going to a daily live show, which is going to be fun. Nice. So it's going to be challenging too, because I know I'm going to have to pre-record some stuff to make it all work because I do travel a lot. Yeah. But that's really what it's all about, man. You know, creating a media company. And I think because, you know, free speech and the ability to communicate, like we've never in history had a time like this before to be able to do that. And I think we have to maximize this. And that's why podcasts and new media and things like that are so vital. Yeah. And that's why we do what we do at Command Your Brand. And that's why I do what I do in the podcast. And it gets back to a question you asked me in the beginning. I think we didn't finish, and that's like, how do all this stuff connect? And for me in the beginning, like that's even why my show is called the Jeremy Ryan Slate Show now, and not the Create Your Own Life Show, because like I had all these different things and they were bubbled off, and I feel like now it's come about like the conversations about free speech, the conversations about conversations we shouldn't be having but we need to have, and it needs to be long form. And I think we're at a point now in history where that's what I want to facilitate, and that's what I want to help, because if I can do that, well, that's how you make an impact. Who you're voting for, who you're campaigning for, or whatever, doesn't really matter a hill of beans if you can't talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm trying to help preserve.
Is free speech.
Yeah.
As a whole. Yeah. What does that look like for you guys? For someone who, I mean, someone like me, I'm like, okay, I get media and like, you know, the whole podcast game and, you know, all that stuff. But like, what does that look like structurally for you guys over the next, you know, 3 years, 5 years? Like, is this multiple different podcasts under one brand? Is this, like, what does that look like specifically?
Well, so from the agency perspective, the thing where a lot of the clients we're supporting are clients that have really big messages that told they can't talk other places. So we have some really cool doctors that have been kicked off of YouTube. Like we're supporting messages like that we think need to be out there that deserve a long form conversation and not to be told they can't communicate. From the brand side, it's talking about a lot of these polarizing issues. And that's frankly why I really enjoyed this conversation today too, because we talked about a lot of big issues that people fight about.
Yeah.
They don't discuss.
Yeah.
And I think when you get the nuance to understand the viewpoint of another and you're able to acknowledge that viewpoint exists, you can make the world a better place. And I think that's what's really important, man. We need to understand other people's viewpoints, and that's what we're trying to help make happen.
That's really cool. So go down that rabbit hole for a minute. So,
well, you think about it, we fight because we don't understand other people. We don't want to.
Okay, so that one of the things that I wrestle with.
It doesn't mean there's no right or wrong either, though, too.
Okay, so like one of the things that I think I wrestle with, and I'm getting better at it. I feel like in some ways I'm getting better at it. In some ways I'm just like, but it's like, I actually think that there are, like, I think that the whole concept of like, hey, we're all human. And when you actually sit down and understand each other, right, it's like, we all basically are the same people type of deal. And I'm like, I think we should love everyone. I'm a Christian. I believe in what Jesus said. I also just think that like, I think evil exists in this world, and it's really,
right. But
really
I think
heavily,
but I think the thing you have to consider is there's a very small percentage of people that are bad people. I think 80% of people are inherently good. 20% aren't.
Ooh, really? Like
I think
inherently good.
Inherently good. I think 80% of people are inherently good. There is a 20% that's bad. There's a 2% of that's even worse. So I think.
But like, how does the fall play into that though? Then
what do you mean?
Like everybody is inherently like we're born into a fallen world.
Right, but it doesn't mean that those people want to commit evil or want to do bad things. I think there's a small percentage of people that are actually motivated by that.
But like, do you think that wow, the concept of some people being like, do you listen to Jordan Peterson at all?
Not really.
Okay, yeah. So,
I don't consume a lot of content,
okay,
man.
yeah,
I listen to like 3 podcasts. I listen to Timcast and I listen to No Agenda, and that's about it.
Okay. Yeah. So like Jordan Peterson, I'm a big fan of his. I actually got to see him. Yeah. It was me. I got to meet and greet with him and Brunson. It was me, Jordan Peterson, Russell Brunson.
Oh, wow.
Really awesome. Yeah. But like his whole concept is that like man is inherently a monster. Like we are capable of horrible, horrifically evil, disgustingly awful things. Every single human being is.
Yeah, I would say only about 20% of people and then about 2% of that. I don't think it's think it's worse than that. I think most people are inherently good.
Interesting. I feel like that contradicts Catholicism though, doesn't it not?
No, because, people can be flawed, but it doesn't mean they're evil. Like I'm talking about evil. And I think 80% of people are good.
Do you think that? Interesting. Okay. All right. I'll accept it for now.
Percolate on that.
I disagree, but like I'll accept it. Okay. So if we were to sit down and have conversations with people,
yeah,
and which by the way, I'm very pro. By the way,
yeah, it's important, man.
I mean, part of what we're building here is a place where the conversation happens, right?
Yeah.
Like
on a golden microphone, of course.
On a golden microphone, right?
Yeah.
Someone says I should get one for that side, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, but if you're the boss man, you got to have the golden one,
dude. Like this is the. But needless to say, I am not convinced that in America today specifically, that Americans and the people that are inside of this country, whether that they are here because they were born here, whether they came in, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like I do not think that, I don't think we're able to agree on the direction of the country.
I agree with that.
And I don't know how,
as I say, I agree with that.
but you know what I mean though? I think
because we've become so increasingly polarized, you know what I mean?
Exactly. And like when you actually sit down and like you see some of the videos, particularly from people that are, the woke, the transgenderism issue is a huge issue with sex ideology and all of that. Like I think is just based in absolute evil, right?
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. And to be clear, I don't think those people are evil, right? I don't think those people, I think that the idea behind it is
sure
that confusion of that, right? But I don't think Like, I don't think if you could magically line up everybody in a row and basically be like, okay, we're all going to discuss and we're all going to get along, whatever. I don't think that America in its current state would have the ability to find common ground and move forward.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because I think we've seen this especially with, it's never going to be perfect, right? It's never going to be perfect. But I think, are you familiar with the walkaway movement?
Yes.
So that's a lot of Democrats that have walked away from the Democratic Party because they said, oh my gosh, what are they doing? And they've moved to Trump. I think the thing...
Yeah, but there's also a lot of Christians that can't do Trump, dude.
Like, well, this isn't even about Trump. I'm just using it as an example. Like, I think when you show people a lot of what's happening, people do start to wake up from that. And I think that is the issue. Both sides, we've lived under so much propaganda for so long. I think when we get to firsthand experiences and it's when I study history, what do I like to read? I like to read primary sources. What are we told not to read now? Primary sources. And I think that's the issue, is we're talking about other people's opinion of what happened. When if you get a lot of people that looked at what happened, you can find agreement on that. So I think when you look and you find two groups fighting, you're often going to find there's a third party somewhere that benefits. So when we can start finding out like who are our third parties causing these situations between us, it's never going to be perfect, but we can start to find more common ground.
So if you sit down with people that are, take politics out of it for a second.
Yeah.
Just, like even among, like, look at the Christian world for a second. I mean, even among Christians, we can't decide what we believe, right?
Yeah.
Like even among specific sects of Christians, you can't decide, like, and there's fighting and things there. And then it just seems like there's this nonstop fighting. And I don't think that that's new to America. I think it's polarized in America and amplified right now and in its current state.
Well, we're in a kind of a pressure cooker right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am about as big as advocate for free speech, like even to the point of some pretty horrific things, right? Like I'm pro people being able to say just about whatever they want to say, even if that would mean like things that like basically like if someone could be like, I think all Christians should be murdered. Like I think that they should be allowed to say it. Like I mean, literally, I am a pro speech, right?
Yeah.
In about as big capacity.
Well, because then if your speech is bad, you just look dumb for saying it,
and I
which
agree
to
with
me
this,
is fine,
right? So my issue though, or the thing that I think I struggle with is I don't know what the end result of that is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because to me, freedom of speech is the most important thing. And also at the same time, just like anything else, like, I don't think it can last. I think there's cycles, right? So it's
That's
like,
true.
How does one maintain, like, I think an overwhelming majority of people in the world today aren't actually pro free speech. They are pro free.
They're pro-free. They're pro-speech that we like.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go, how do you sit down, or how do you disagree with people, or I don't even know, how do you maintain free speech, I guess? Like how do you maintain, like with what you're talking about with your brand, which I'm 100% on board with. Like I'm pro what you're doing. I'm pro all of this. And I go, the question I ask myself is, I go, and then what?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so we get free speech. Let's pretend magically the government comes out and Donald Trump gets into office and declares universally that free speech is secure forever. And Elon is, like Facebook has to allow everything or whatever. Now what? Like, then what happens? Well,
I think when you look at that, then like you give people the freedom to talk, but also like, it doesn't mean I have to support messages I don't agree with. They still have a right to talk. It doesn't mean I have to like promote those messages. So I think that's what it comes down to, is you take speech, the freedom to say what needs to be said. But then as a company, like, sure, I'm going to promote things that are aligned more with my moral framework, because I think, to me, that's the most important thing to get out there. But it doesn't mean the other side can't say anything. It just means that I'm going to flow energy to what I think is the most moral and the most right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they can't say it.
Do you think free speech can be preserved indefinitely?
It's really difficult. It's really difficult because men grasp for power. I think that's what it comes down to. You look at the early Roman Empire. We're talking about like under the rule of Augustus. So it's 31 BC to 17 AD. Like, he actually rewrote a lot of Roman history. He created all new statues of himself where he was never more than 30 years old, because, if he's a god, he's never going to get old. A lot of the new, are you familiar with the concept of the Trojan horse?
Oh yeah.
The Trojan horse is not in the Iliad. It's in the Aeneid, which is the Roman version of the Iliad. And it makes the Romans descendant from the Trojans. So like, so much of the propaganda that the whole empire functioned for came under Augustus. So sure, peace came with Augustus, but the freedom of what to think and what to talk about disappeared. So yeah, I think it does through time, like freedom of speech does change. Is that a good thing? You know, sure, there was peace for, 100 years in the Pax Romana after that point in time, but like, were people able to talk about things that mattered, right? Like if you could just talk about football and baseball and everything else, well, sure, that might be fun, but like, are you as a person doing what you need to do? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. This has been good. It's been a fun episode.
Did we go a lot of directions you didn't expect?
Yeah, in a way, but also at the same time, I feel like we covered a lot of things that I did expect. But it's fascinating to hear not only the history, but also your perspective on things, which is, I feel like it makes a lot of sense to kind of form you out as a person, if you will. I was like, okay, that actually makes sense. That's why you're here, here. The one thing I do have a question on to kind of wrap this whole thing up, because I think you and I align on a lot of values, particularly politically and with, pro free speech and, taking responsibility for your life and things of that nature. Why are you not more into Bitcoin?
I should be. I'm just not.
Okay. Like, you're not against it?
I'm not against it. I guess that's the conspiracy theorist in me, because I'm like, what if the guy that wrote the Bitcoin white paper is actually Klaus Schwab and he's going to own all our money? I still got a little bit of that in me. I'll be honest.
Yeah. But you should.
He did step down yesterday, though.
I know. I saw that.
So, that's, to me, that's my major concern. Is I like the fact that it's, it's not centralized. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
But the thing that scares me is the who. I don't know the who. That worries me.
Yeah. But also it's just code. I should just go read it.
I can't write code. I don't know.
Yeah, but you can literally read.
My illiteracy scares me.
You can literally read the white papers, right? And you can see, because
I'm not anti-Bitcoin. I think it's important for me. A lot of my friends have been giving me a hard time about it. So
because here's the thing,
it should agree with everything I do.
It does, right? And the thing is that when people don't understand about Bitcoin, and I think perhaps the one of its big I don't know if flaws is the right word, but is that people think Bitcoin is just money. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no. Bitcoin, number one, is not. It's
a technology.
Right. Bitcoin is math. Everything is backed in just math. That's all it is. But Bitcoin is history. Bitcoin is freedom of speech. Bitcoin is the ability to preserve wealth. Bitcoin is it has all these characteristics. And when someone came out and was like, Bitcoin is truth, and all, my Christian friends are like, you can't claim that. I'm like, okay. No, not in the sense of Jesus is truth. I get that. But when
it's honesty, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It's this thing of it's this ability to preserve things over time that nobody can manipulate, mm-hmm. right? And when you look at this, how it's all done, I think that Bitcoin is the single most important piece of technology or innovation in the history of my entire lifetime, and I don't even think it's close. Mm-hmm. And when I hear people like you, who you're smart, dude, you're a very smart human being, you're very smart, you're way smarter than I am, right? And I hear people that are pro speech or pro America and pro freedom and pro, morals and pro taking responsibility for your life and pro all these things, and you're not in Bitcoin. I go, but why? But why?
It goes back to the gold and silver thing. Yeah. I like that I can hold it. Yeah. I like the value of gold over centuries. So yes, I know I should buy more Bitcoin, but I've got my.
No, I don't think you should buy more Bitcoin.
I've got my little leprechaun pot of gold.
Yeah, but I think you should study it more. I think it's worth studying.
I want to do that.
And I think that
let's do a podcast on Bitcoin. You want to do that?
Yeah. Well, I'm doing one with Brad.
Oh, you want to educate me on Bitcoin? I would love to.
Well, see, here's the thing. I don't know. I have studied Bitcoin more. That's why.
Well, I guess that's the thing I've been trying to find is there's a lot of people into Bitcoin, but I haven't found anybody that can. I really want to know about Bitcoin. So who's that person I could interview for that? That's what I want to do.
Ooh, man.
You know what I mean?
Robert Breedlove would be a really good one.
I really want to understand it.
I will get to the point where I'm actually feel like I'm willing to actually share and educate.
Because I love to study subjects. I'm a rabbit hole person, but I haven't found I feel like there's a lot of people and I don't know how to describe this. There's some people that are really into Bitcoin because they believe it, and there's a lot of Bitcoin bros and everything else. You know what I mean? Bros, so it's
Bitcoin is not a way to get rich.
Who do I know is the right person to talk to? You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you can get Robert Breedlove on the show, that would be a really, really good one.
Okay. I would do it.
He's a good person to get on there. At some point, I will be at a point where I feel like I can actually have enough knowledge to answer questions fully. I'm obsessed over this. And your Roman Empire, that is my Bitcoin. That is all. The books, the podcast, the studies of it all. But one of my best friends is Brad Gibb. Do you know Brad Gibb by any chance?
No, yeah.
So Brad is the smartest human being I've ever met. Just actually just so smart, it's ridiculous type of deal.
Yeah.
When it comes to just money and finances, he worked on he worked on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs. He's taken companies public, has 8-figure companies, like owns tens of millions of dollars of real estate. I mean, just brilliant when it comes to money. And he's basically just been not into Bitcoin at all. Right. And I'm like, bro, you can't, like, you've got to. And he's like, I remember I went to his house and I was like, if I were to start sending you like little clips or little pieces of information on Bitcoin, like, how would you best like to receive those? And he goes, probably none at all, because I don't care. Right. I'm like, dang, dude.
See, it's not that I don't care. I just I don't know enough about it, and I don't know the right sources.
But that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden he's like, yo, okay, so tell me more about this Bitcoin. Right. So we're coming out. He's actually coming out. We're gonna do an episode on it, and we're gonna kind of go back and forth, because he understands debt and money and like all the different things. And Bitcoin, I really do think like it changes, like the principles of money just changed. Like the principles of economics just changed. The principles of value and history just changed. Like so many things are able to happen now that weren't before. I think it's worth studying, dude. Like just.
I'm willing. I just gotta find that person that'll give me the right information.
I need to create a resource for people that they're like, here's where to go. But dude, thank you for coming out. Tell people, promote something. I don't know. Where can people find you? Where can people find out more about what you're doing?
A lot of what we talked about today, we talked about empires, we talked about preserving them and growing them.
Yep.
I put together a really great resource called How to Command Your Empire. I want people to know the right PR things. I want people to know how to outcreate this economy we're living in, because it is the wrong time to pull back. It's the wrong time to not promote. So if you go to commandyourempire.com, I got a free white paper for you over there.
Sweet.
It is going to teach you everything you need to know to like start promoting, start getting out there more, start taking advantage of this new media. So that's over at commandyourempire.com.
Okay, cool. We will link that down below. We'll put it on YouTube and on audio as well. Dude, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
It was really, really fun.
Yeah.
And all right, we're going to go look at the camera here real quick and smile. All right, now we got a picture for it. We can clip that out. Appreciate your time, dude. Have a safe trip home. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, have me.